Howdy everyone, this is Dave, and we've got another Disney villain to talk about. Captain James Bartholomew Hook, from Disney's 18th animated feature film, Peter Pan. I was introduced to this just before the movie Hook came out, which I've watched a million times. Fox also had an animated series called Peter Pan and the Pirates, which aired at the same time, with Tim Curry voicing the man himself. So needless to say, I was getting Captain Hook overload at a critical point in childhood development. I blame this character as a major factor in why I've loved swords my entire life. Peter Pan was the last movie that Disney released through RKO Radio Pictures on February 5th, 1953. It's one of those movies that's been in and out of the vault several times, so when people saw it first may vary. The original Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, was a play written by J.M. Barrie that premiered in London on December 27, 1904. Barrie later adapted the play into a book called Peter and Wendy in 1911. It is said that his version of Hook was based on Christopher Newport, a privateer that launched attacks on Spain, and later helped establish the first permanent English settlement at Jamestown. Disney's adaptation of Hook was voiced by Hans Conried, who also did the voice for George Darling in this movie. The captain is a refined and distinguished old codger, who's capable of commanding a bloodthirsty pirate crew. Which means that he's just as ruthless as any other Disney villain, and capable of some pretty heinous things. He's a towering presence, well-armed, experienced in combat, and has a thriving disregard for the well-being of others. He's got long black hair, and a thin handlebar mustache under his enormous nose. He has a long and liney face, with dark eyelids and bags under his eyes. He stunts a big hat with a feather, a red coat with gold lining, fancy shoes, and puff sleeves.
Look at the puffs!
Captain Hook also stays strapped, with a long sharp rapier, flintlock pistol, and of course, a curved hook on his left hand, which is badass. But I can't help but think of all of the unintentional accidents that one would have with such an attachment. Of all the Disney villains, I'd have to say that I sympathize with Hook the most. This guy is dealt a pretty gnarly card, and I am not jealous of his life whatsoever. But we'll get more into that later. Without further ado, here we go. The flick opens up establishing the Darling residence in Bloomsbury, London. Parents, George and Mary, with their children Wendy, John, and Michael. They have a nanny that's a St. Bernard named Nana. As always, books provide way more backstory, like George and Mary first meeting and how they found Nana in the park, and somehow come to the conclusion that she is going to act like an actual nanny. The movie doesn't bother explaining any of that to you, and you just accept that this dog has the wherewithal to monitor and take care of children. The adults are getting ready for a work party, and George is miffed because he can't find his cufflinks. The narrator introduces the children along with their feelings about Peter Pan. Mary and George are just like whatever about him. He's just a fairy tale that kids are into. Little do they realize that the children actually believe and are basically operating as a Peter Pan cult, placing him at the center of all of their games and activities, focusing on Peter Pan to the point of obsession. We see the boys reenacting epic battles and Wendy acting as the continuity czar, like reminding John that the hook should be on his left hand. Wendy is not only a true believer that is enabling her brothers, but the narrator states that she is the supreme authority on Peter Pan and all of his marvelous adventures. They are lost deep in the sauce, and this true belief is why Peter visits them, especially to hear the stories. George figures out what's going on under his roof at the worst time. He enters and discovers the Peter Pan mania in full swing.
That was swinging, man. Swinging? Swinging. That's good, right? Swinging's good.
They've hidden his cufflinks as buried treasure and used chalk to draw a treasure map on his shirt front. You can see the dysfunction arise in real time, as George's family doesn't take him seriously. Ignored, minimized, disrespected, take your pick. This causes him to lash out with yelling and brash decisions. He brings the hammer down hard, stating that this is the last night that Wendy is spending in the nursery, and it's time for her to grow the f*** up. During all of this madness, Nana is stuck in an endless loop of remaking beds and rebuilding blocks. Ultimately, she ends up as collateral damage, and George is faced with the fact that his family doesn't give a crap about him. Let's be real, we would all be rushing to the dog too. But of course, George makes it about him. Instead of realizing that he has a shitty relationship with his family and needs to work on it, he sees it as the last straw. Nana also has to be punished. She has her nanny title revoked and has to spend the rest of the night outside.
That's freaking awesome! Not. It's fucking dumb.
She's a good girl though. As the kids are being tucked in, John is flabbergasted that his dad doesn't believe in Peter Pan. Like his head is in his hands, contemplating that shit. Wendy requests to leave the window unlocked because he might come back. Mary's like, he? And Wendy starts going on about Peter Pan's shadow. In the book, it's actually Mary that sees Peter first. Nana grabs him by the shadow. He flies away, but the shadow stays. Mary then rolls it up and places it in a drawer. In the movie, it's Wendy who puts it away, leaving her mother to worry that she's lost her marbles.
Lost.
Lost what?
I've lost my marbles.
But she doesn't like the idea of Wendy seeing a shadow in the window either way, so naturally she leaves it unlocked. She asks George about it when they leave, but he doesn't seem to care about his daughter potentially seeing someone in her window, and begins spewing obnoxious sarcasm as they walk away. Peter and Tinkerbell watch from the rooftop and enter once the coast is cleared. The other kids are asleep, so they quietly look around for his shadow. Once they find it, the shadow isn't interested in conjoining with Peter, accelerating things into a chase and scuffle that awakens Wendy. She recognizes him immediately and starts talking. A lot. She rambles about finding the shadow and saving it, that he can't put it back on with a bar of soap, and that she will have to sew it back on. What if that doesn't work either? Do not sew thread into me. Peter can't get a word in until he rudely blurts out,
Girls talk too much.
Yes, girls talk to
Wendy is going to find throughout this adventure that Peter Pan is up to date on all of his certifications to be a tremendous douchebag, self-centered, cocky, and cruel. It won't make a difference on her opinion of him. I'm just saying for future reference. Wendy tells him that it's her last night in the nursery, and he's like, that means I won't be able to hear stories about myself that I can go back and tell the Lost Boys. I mean, they already go on adventures with you. I'm sure they see you in action, or I'm sure you at least brag about something cool you did immediately after you return home. Now you need extra content about yourself to keep them entertained? Peter's solution is to remove Wendy from her life in London and take her to Neverland, so that she doesn't have to grow up, and he can use her as the head of the propaganda machine to feed his ego and establish lore, whether it's true or not. Tinkerbell doesn't like Wendy, and it gets aggressive when she tries to get fresh with him.
Yoink.
Michael and John wake up and Peter sprinkles Tink's fairy dust on them, instructing to think of a happy thought in order to fly. They take off, second star to the right and straight on till morning, doing so on a spur of the moment, literally still dressed for bed. Absolutely no condition to be out flying around at night, going on adventures. They're aware of Neverland, and that it's an island filled with pirates, aboriginals, ferocious mermaids, and who knows what else. Depending on what rendition you're going with, various quadrants of Neverland could have vastly different climates. Walking in a jungle one minute, and then a snowy tundra the next. That's not even considering the plants and other creatures that you may encounter. Now I know this is shocking to hear, but a lot of adventures include peril. And the last thing that I would want to be wearing are slippers, a top hat, and a fucking nightie. Are you kidding me, John? Would you see Nathan Drake, Rick O'Connell, or Indiana Jones pulling that shit? As they approach Neverland, we zoom in on the Jolly Roger, anchored in Cannibal Cove. The pirates operate on a skeleton crew. We've got Mullins, Turk, Black Murphy, Bill Jukes, Wibbles, Starkey, and Skylights. These pirates are bored as hell and want nothing more than to set sail and leave the island for good. They'd much rather be out there wreaking havoc on the high seas, doing typical pirate-esque things. Turk says that he's almost forgotten how to slit a throat, and just hearing that, it's so sad. It's not good to let the skills of your employees stagnate like that. You can't have them perform any team-building exercises. Regrettably for them, they'll be stuck there for the foreseeable future, while Captain Hook tries to get even with Peter Pan, and it's taking much longer than anticipated. The airing of grievances and other hints like throwing knives at a drawing that says Captain, for example, shows that their patience is running thin. The first we see of Hook, he's sitting at a desk on the top deck, poring over a map of Neverland with a dual cigar holder. He's racking his brains, trying to figure out the secret to Peter Pan's hiding place. Judging by the size of the island and how long they've been at this, I'm wondering how they haven't searched every inch of the island by now. There are only a handful of established locations they can visit. So what's up with that? You can't be too sure about Neverland though, because everyone is so hostile. Beef is imminent between every faction. We see a drawing on the map depicting an indigenous person, but the tribe isn't mentioned in the movie, and we don't see any sign of them throughout. They certainly aren't in the book. Judging by this little drawing on the map, and then later how dirty the Indians were done, that's probably for the best. Hook states that they've combed Cannibal Cove, but my mind is filling in the blanks, and I'm rolling with the idea that the pirates went to war with the tribe and came out on top, now in control of the cove. In the book there is no shortage of pirates to be murdered, but there aren't nearly as many pirates in the movie, lending to the notion that a conflict with people that eat their enemies may explain why their numbers are low. On the other hand, Captain Hook rules his crew with a bloodthirsty fist. If you call this man your captain, then you better count your days, because it's only a matter of time before you mildly annoy him, or God forbid, ask a question, and you find yourself permanently relieved of duty. Hook must be responsible for more fatalities amongst his own men than we'll ever know. He has no qualms of disposing of any member of his crew, and that means he's cool with a variety of other methods, like walking the plank, keel hauling, marooning, running them through with his cold steel, getting creative with his hook, or as he says in the book, cast anchor, which I really like and I'm going to be using it. Or he could just shoot them the way he does skylights. Who gets blasted right away for singing a song? I'm sure he would have been perfectly fine with stopping if the captain ordered him to. He better chill or he's going to run out of men. Hook has come up with numerous ideas to get even with Peter Pan, but they all fail miserably. I'd say the failure is by his own doing, but honestly, Peter Pan's flying ability is so OP. And the times that he almost does get him are thwarted somehow. If anyone has a high likelihood to mess things up, then it's going to be his first mate, Mr. Smee, voiced by our boy Bill Thompson. He's super loyal, but it's a roll of the dice whether he's useful or not. In the heat of combat, friendly fire is on, and his buffoonery causes exponential grief. Smee is one of those henchmen that holds the title of second in command, but receives little to no respect from his subordinates. An object that does not make an appearance in the movie, that does in other Peter Pan media, is Mr. Smee's sword, Johnny Corkscrew.
Aye, he got us. Johnny Corkscrew, let the air in and the blood out.
Which sounds like a porn star name. He likes to use all these cute and creative words with his Irish accent, like I'm gonna tickle him with Johnny Corkscrew. And he even named it that because he likes to, and I quote, wriggle it in the wound.
Jesus.
We learn that during their first encounter, Pan jokingly severs Hook's left hand from his body, as a prank. Now let that just settle in for a moment. Some feral child who sees everything as a game cuts through the skin of your wrist and severs the tendons, blood vessels, and all that good stuff until the blade hits the bone in your wrist. Then the hand that you've had your entire life just comes off. While you're trying to stave off the bleeding and utter shock of what just happened, the little prick flies over and feeds it to a monster.
And something even more fucking diabolical.
Captain Hook most likely had to watch as that thing swallowed a part of him. You know Pete was laughing the entire time he was doing it too. Such a funny game. Then imagine that after this extremely disturbing experience, you notice that the croc is actively following you around because you were so delicious that now it wants to hang out around you until it can catch you slipping and get the rest. We are shown what effect this has on Captain Hook. It gets even more psychological because at some point the croc swallowed a clock, and the ticking is audible when nearby. He obviously has PTSD, and is understandably petrified whenever he hears the tick-tock approaching. Captain Hook in the original story brings up the clock thing. During one of their numerous encounters, he ended up tricking the crocodile into swallowing a clock, not by accident, but kind of like an insurance policy. That way he would at least have a chance when the croc was sneaking up on him. As soon as he heard the ticking, he knew that he had to get moving. The psychological part is thinking about what will happen when the clock runs out, and you won't hear the ticking anymore, representing time, and how eventually it runs out.
And takes us all.
Mullins spots Pan and the Darlings, and Hook orders them to man the cannons. Peter draws fire and tells Tink to take the others to the island. She rushes at ludicrous speed, and the others can't keep up.
Ludicrous speed! Go!
They've gone to Plaid!
She flies into the hideout and warns the Lost Boys that Peter wants them to execute Order 66 on an intruder. The Lost Boys oblige and throw everything they've got at Wendy. Peter comes through and saves her. They're all confused and try to figure out what happened. Tink's high treason is brought up and she is without any remorse for what she's done. So Peter banishes her. Toodles, the old guy who lost his marbles and Hook, is featured heavily in the original story. He's actually the one who shoots Wendy down, hitting her with an arrow, to which the thimble that represents a kiss saves her, which was a good thing because if Wendy would have died, then Peter would have just left the area and never came back, leaving her body to the elements, which he had apparently done before. I'm telling you, the book is a lot more graphic, in pretty much every way. That version of Neverland is a place I never want to visit. It's just so hostile. Every faction is trying to de-life one another. What gave me the heebie-jeebies was the depiction of Indians running around draped in scalps of various pirates and Lost Boys. The first history video I made for this channel was about a man who was scalped as a young boy. And when that detail was mentioned, my mind immediately flashed to how horrific it is, and the aftermath of it happening to the members of the Lost Boys. Brutal! Being scalped doesn't necessarily mean that the victim dies, and these kids don't grow up. So imagine little scalped boys running around for eternity. It's just gruesome. Their only way out is to leave Neverland and grow up, or to get killed. Man, this is supposed to be for children. What's even more messed up is that Peter Pan has a tendency to change sides during the heat of battle. So imagine you're being led into a conflict, only to have your leader turn on you and start scalping one of his own guys. The book version of Peter Pan has absolutely no problems with maiming and disfiguring the Lost Boys. For example, they all get their own tree to live in, and they must fit. If they don't, then Peter alters them. I know I'm doing a lot of air quotes, but there's some messed up verbiage going on. Then they must make an effort to keep fitting in it, so the alterations are ongoing. Back to the movie. Pan offers to give them a tour of the island, but everyone has their own plans of what they want to do, so they split up. Peter and Wendy head off to see the mermaids, while John, Michael, and the Lost Boys go to see the Indians. So when I watched this on Disney Plus, I got a disclaimer at the beginning acknowledging that this movie has stereotypes in it and whatnot. It had been a very long time since I watched it, and I genuinely couldn't think of why they would need to have something like that. Then after viewing from an adult perspective, let's just say that the disclaimer was not unfounded. All of this went way over my head as a kid, but Captain Hook totally uses a slur that I don't remember ever hearing before. It's definitely not as bad as the book, which simply refers to the natives as that slur exclusively throughout. But the main thing here is just how they were drawn, man. Why do they gotta look like this? Just about every native in this movie looks hit. We see a couple instances where Indians are drawn perfectly fine, like the chief's daughter Tiger Lily. She looks normal. The Lost Boys are easily captured by the tribe and are taken to the chief. He tells them that Tiger Lily has been kidnapped, and he is not f***ing around with them. This guy is pissed, talking about burning their asses at the stake and calling it a day. Typical girl dad behavior. Peter asks Wendy if she would like to meet the mermaids. She's like, hell yeah, and then he immediately bails on her. Wendy struggles to follow him, while he acts like she doesn't exist. If Wendy was oblivious to all of the red flags before, this should be the wake-up call. That's why she has a hard time flying here, because she has to be thinking of a happy thought in order to do so. And he's presenting her with scenarios where she is straight up not having a good time. Like, who's gonna be happy seeing their crush risen up some finned bitches? You would either need to have the mental fortitude of Professor X, or be a complete narcissist that is dissociated from reality in order to use this flying ability effectively. Too much hinges on the happy thought thing. Peter is egotistical and forces himself to have fun, which makes him an expert at flying. He laughs at everything, whether it's joyful or macabre, taking delight in the suffering of others. The book says that Peter saw and forgot many tragedies, and when he approaches a fight with Captain Hook, someone that everyone is afraid of, he does so not with a sinking feeling, but a feeling of gladness. All of these factor into him being able to bust the move out at any given moment. I don't know about you, but my ADHD ass would find that really difficult. My thoughts and mood are too untrustworthy to rely on this ability. Seeing these mermaids produces a happy thought for Peter, so of course he's drawn to them, leaving Wendy stuck on a rock. She calls out, but getting their attention was not the move to make, because it is on sight when she is detected. Peter is no help, stranded on a rock with nowhere to go, at the mercy of the jealous sirens. They attempt to pull her into the water, and when that doesn't work, they start splashing her. Peter laughs hysterically. He only interferes when Wendy is forced to defend herself. Then he starts gaslighting her, saying it was only fun, which is bullshit because one of the mermaids admits premeditation.
We were only trying to drown her.
You see?
Wendy starts to tell Peter to go fuck himself, but is cut short because danger approaches. He spots Captain Hook, Mr. Smee, Tiger Lily, and of course the Crocodile, all making their way to Skull Rock. Peter and Wendy follow them to see what's going on, completely unaware of how serious it is for John, Michael, and the Lost Boys. They set Tiger Lily on a rock and tie an anchor around her. Hook gives an ultimatum. She tells him where Peter Pan's hiding place is, or she drowns when the tide comes in. He reminds her that drowning is one of the ways that her spirit will never find peace in the afterlife, stating that there is no path through water to the happy hunting ground, hoping that will add enough pressure to make her talk.
Come on, bitch. Where's your stud?
I don't know where Mike is.
Wrong answer.
Lay off me, you bastard!
So not only is he offing her, but he's screwing her over for eternity as well. That sounds like a good way to get haunted. Not only will he have the croc to contend with, but a specter of the chieftain's daughter. Something I wonder is how many times do you think Hook's done this to members of the tribe that he's captured before? Peter pulls out some ventriloquism and lures Hook away from the boat. His stealth is maxed out, as he can just levitate above ground. Once Hook is distracted, Peter quickly flies inside the cave and begins talking to Mr. Smee, putting on his best Captain Hook impression, telling him to release Tiger Lily and take her back to her people. Smee does so, and Hook is bamboozled by the sight of his first mate doing the literal opposite of what they came there to do. He commands him to put her back.
Well, put it back.
But then he hears Smee talking to the voice and investigates, finding Peter to be spewing all sorts of wild and contradictory rhetoric.
When you return to the ship, tell the whole crew to themselves.
As he raises his hook, ready to cast anchor in his face, Wendy calls out, and the split-second reaction time saves him from getting a unique piercing. Hook finds himself in a very precarious situation, with his adversary flying all over the place, unable to memorize his attack patterns. If anyone were to fight Hook one-on-one with both feet on the ground, then I have no doubt that he would mop the floor with them. Unfortunately, everything that he is as a man of combat is thrown out the window when it comes to this flying devil. Hook takes a swing at Peter, but he swishes around, lifts up his coat and grabs his pistol, then gives it to Mr. Smee and tells him to try his luck. Smee goes for it, but it's impossible to lock in. He flies right in front of Hook, and the befuddled Smee, without question, aims that bad boy right at him and fires.
Hold it, you fool! No! No!
Peter is sadistic as hell for this. He had options, where he could have distracted them, stealthily cut Tiger Lily free, and fly away undetected, or he could have just easily offed these guys at any moment, just silently float over with the dagger out and give them a little. Instead, he decides to toy with them, like he's played this level 30 times already and is just messing around. This is literally life and death, and he's laughing and having a great time with it. Captain Hook almost gets headshotted with his own weapon by his own first mate. It all happens pretty fast, but basically Hook would have been fine if he stayed where he was. But nonetheless, he falls back head first. He would rather dash his brains on the rocks below over having them paint the cave wall. However, it all happens so quick that everyone just assumes that Hook's dome was blown wide open, and he's now pooling up in a crevice somewhere. Peter even appears to believe it this time, having a moment of silence for his fallen rival. Despite what everyone thinks, the captain did survive. He's about to run Peter through with the cold steel, but Smee ruins it. The second time he's had a surprise attack thwarted in this fight alone. If he were able to get to Peter without anyone else around, then I think he would have a chance. Because man, once you're on Flyboy's radar, all you can do is try to survive. Peter gives Captain Hook hell, making a mockery of him and disrespecting his hat, which he must have 1,000 spares because that is the first thing to go when the swashbuckling starts. And it's a liability if anything. Pan even has the physical power to block and override Hook's attack and get the upper hand with just a knife. So not only is the kid quick, but he's strong too. Hook's hanging over a ledge with Peter ridiculing him, reducing the guy to tears and empty threats. Then, as if it can't get any worse, the Croc shows up. Peter plays up the psychological warfare as the ticking gets closer, asking the Croc if it likes codfish. It launches an attack, and the only person that can help him is Smee, who is actually negative help, and in fact does more bad than good. The rest of this part is various sequences of Hook screaming in horror as he is almost eaten alive by his greatest fear. He ends up swimming away with the ravenous beast in hot pursuit. Peter saves Tiger Lily before she drowns, and they return her to the tribe where they have an interesting ceremony. Hook must have just swam back to the ship himself, because the next scene is at the Jolly Roger, with the Croc circling outside his window, licking its chops at the thought of how good that dude was tasting earlier. Hook is recovering, and once again, Smee adds to the misery, bludgeoning him with a hammer and pouring boiling hot water on his feet. Anyways, Smee brings up some gossip that he heard from the crew, that Peter Pan had banished Tinkerbell because of Wendy. In reality, I want to know how they know who Wendy is, especially by name. Hook only saw her from far away through his spyglass, and she was hidden the entire time at Skull Rock. She did shout to warn Peter, but nobody acknowledged her. This is the best news that Hook has heard in a long time, because Tinkerbell acts as a sentinel that is indisputably loyal to Peter Pan, and likely a huge reason why revenge plots always fail. Nobody knows Peter better than her, so Hook devises a plan, sending Smee to capture Tinkerbell and bring her back to him. After doing so, Smee comes to the conclusion that he needs to get hammered before this very important meeting.
Ooh, whose mans is this?
Who mans is this?
Family.
He tells Tink that he and the crew will be leaving Neverland the next day, and they won't be coming back. He wants her to tell Peter that he's got no hard feelings toward him, and plays up Tinkerbell's jealousy by mentioning Wendy. He really hams it up and shows sympathy. In the book there's a quote that sticks out, stating that Hook was never more sinister than when he was being polite. And that rings true here. He offers to Shanghai Wendy, which means that he would abduct her and take her out to sea with them. This manipulates her into telling him where the Lost Boys' hideout is on the map, even making him pass a vibe check beforehand, having him promise not to lay a hand or hook on him. He does so, and after she tells him, he locks her up in a lantern.
Son of a bitch!
The crew assembles, and they make their way to Hangman's Tree. So during the racially insensitive ceremony with the Indians, Wendy wasn't allowed to participate because she's a girl, and this other lady kept materializing between her and any fun, ordering her to get firewood. Like she's a guest, chill out, bitch! On top of that, she sees that Peter is obviously occupied with Tiger Lily, and instead of putting up with this shit, she decides to leave by walking. No happy thoughts here. This seems to be the last straw, because later on when they return to the hideout, she is already there, completely over the trip and wants to go home. She red pills the entire Lost Boys faction by telling them about what having a mother is like, and they elect to go back with the Darlings. Peter tells them that if they leave, then they can never come back, but he assumes that they aren't leaving. They crawl out of the hideout and land directly in the clutches of the pirates and taken away, leaving Peter cornered and at the mercy of his foe. Captain Hook and Mr. Smee agree that it would be more humane to slit his throat and let him gargle and choke on his own blood. But since Captain Hook is the pinnacle of decency, honor, and morality, and the fact that he gave his word not to lay a finger or hook on him, he resorts to leaving explosives, disguised as a present, timed to detonate at 6 o'clock in the morning. Possibly the biggest difference that I noticed was that throughout this movie, we see numerous clocks. But in the book, the only way for them to tell time on the island is to find the crocodile and wait until the clock inside sounds off at the top of the hour. They return to the ship where Captain Hook gives the Darlings and the Lost Boys a chance to join his crew. If they don't want to, then they will be forced to walk the plank. Wendy is confident that Peter Pan will save them, but that's when he discloses the plan to blow him up. Peter isn't self-aware whatsoever. Why would a girl give you a present after you acted like an asshole and a douchebag? Those kids left the house dressed ready for bed. When did she have time, in all of this, to not only find and obtain a present, but also a box, wrapping paper, and a pink ribbon, and then wrap it? Come on, man. Oh, look who visited. Tinkerbell breaks out of the lantern and shows up just in time to grab the box and flee. But that's when a massive explosion occurs that can be seen from everywhere on the island. Somehow Peter and Tink survive after being at ground zero, which I'll say is a lot more devastating than her drinking poison like in the book.
She drank the poison that Captain Hook intended for Peter Pan.
Tinkerbell!
Fuck 'em.
Onlookers from the ship think that Peter's dead. Wendy speaks on behalf of everyone by telling Captain Hook to kindly get bent. Wendy walks the plank first, and when she drops, there's no splash. The crew is perplexed. Bill Jukes suggests to Starkey that the ship is damned, and the concerned employee approaches upper management and simply voices what everyone's thinking.
No splash, Captain. I'll give you a splash.
Peter makes his presence known, and they start fighting. He frees the Lost Boys so they can take their last stand in the crow's nest. Captain Hook gets bested by Peter at every turn. As I mentioned before, I think Captain Hook would be formidable if you squared up to him. But how can you block attacks that you don't even know exist? Like you're fighting, and then your opponent launches himself back, bounces off the ropes like a super catapult, smashes both feet into your face, and you go soaring through the air and crashing into something heavy that knocks you the fuck out. You can't calculate for stuff like that. Mr. Smee was visibly shaken by the sight of Peter Pan. Ghost or not, he decides it's time to dip, ready to leave it all behind. Peter cuts the rope ladder holding all the pirates, and Michael crushes Turk's head with a cannonball. They fall in the boat with Mr. Smee. The unconscious big guy lands on top, incapacitating them for the rest of the movie, leaving Captain Hook the last man standing. Captain Hook starts calling Peter out for flying away all the time, and how it's a real bitch move, that if he actually stood his ground and fought a man-to-man, then he would end up flying away like a coward, because otherwise he'd be dead. Valid. Pan's ego gets the better of him, and high up on a yard, he gives him his word that he'll fight without flying, and with one arm behind his back. Hook quickly shows that punk ass he ain't shit without flying, and throws his dagger aside. Just as things are about to get interesting, Peter pulls the Jolly Roger flag over Hook and ties him up in it. He catches his sword and points it at him. Hook starts crying again, and Peter makes him shout out that he's a codfish. After the humiliation ritual, Peter begins crowing in victory. Our dear captain takes the opportunity to cast anchor in his back, but of course Wendy warns him, leaving Peter just enough time to react and send Captain Hook falling into the open mouth of the crocodile. He ends up getting skidded across the water like a rock into the horizon, with the croc and the crew in pursuit. Similar to how the last encounter went, it seems like this is a pattern. In the book, Captain Hook and Peter's final battle is rather anticlimactic. He basically has nothing on him except to criticize his form for a split second before he falls into the water and is eaten by the crocodile.
Good form, old man.
Then that's it. He's gone. All the rest of the pirates are either killed or captured by the Indians. Smee and Starkey are the only ones that make it out. Smee wanders around, telling people that he was the only person that Captain Hook was afraid of. The rest of the book wraps up with the Darling children and some of the Lost Boys returning home. The Lost Boys stay with them and eventually forget how to fly and become average people that grow up and get jobs. Mrs. Darling allows Wendy to go back to Neverland for 1 week out of the year to help Peter with his spring cleaning. By the time that year rolls around and he returns, Wendy is flabbergasted to find out that he has forgotten all about Captain Hook and Tinkerbell, stating that he forgets them after he kills them, and that fairies don't live long, and there have been many other fairies. She waited all year thinking about how that adventure had been so remarkable. But Peter had to start forgetting about it because so many new adventures were happening. He shows up again the next year, but after that he doesn't come back until Wendy is much older, married, and has a daughter named Jane. Peter has a melty when he finds out that Wendy has grown up, but by the end of the story, they have this unspoken arrangement where the daughters of Wendy will go with Peter and have all these experiences. Jane leaves with him, and then Jane's daughter will do the same thing in a couple decades, and so on and so forth. Kinda weird to think about having like your whole lineage have their first crush on the same person. But whatever, I guess. It's not like the author was free of controversy or anything. Back to the movie. Pan and the Lost Boys claim the pirate ship, and Tinkerbell's magic fairy dust allows the ship to turn gold and fly. The clock strikes 11 p.m., and the Darlings are just arriving home from the party. After some time has passed, Mr. Darling realizes that he's overreacted. He just says something like, "You know how I get with these things." Dude, nobody likes when you get that way. So why don't you just show some self-control and some consistency and stop doing it? They just get over it and the issue is never resolved. They find Wendy passed out next to the open window. They awaken her and she starts going off about their adventure without any filter, and her parents think she's nuts. Then clouds form to look like the Jolly Roger and fly across the moon while George says he remembers seeing that ship when he was a little kid. At the very beginning of the movie, in the first line, the narrator states that this has all happened before, and it will all happen again. How many times has Pan brought random children to Neverland? Did this happen to George as a boy and he just forgot about it when he became an asshole? Was he once a lost boy? Who knows? The end. Captain Hook is a murderous cutthroat and traumatized individual. I can't help but feel bad for him because of how slow and torturous his existence is. He keeps getting bested by Peter Pan and is slowly being taken apart. In the back of his mind, he knows that at some point he will probably die by being eaten by the crocodile. The guy never wins, and it can be hard to take him seriously with how much of a laughingstock that Pan makes him. Captain Hook saw numerous appearances in other media, from House of Mouse to games to other adaptations not related to Disney. He's still getting recognition, and I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. There's a whole other sequel that Disney made in the early 2000s called Return to Neverland, but I'm not going to go into all that in this video. Disney experimented a lot with those cheesy sequels that were straight to DVD back in the day, and they weren't really that bad, but they weren't really that good either. Even my young pre-internet mind knew that too much time had passed between these films, and they couldn't be seen as anything other than a cash grab. Howdy everyone, this is Dave, and there's a low-key Disney villain that I want to talk about. This video will cover Edgar Balthazar from Disney's 20th animated feature film, The Aristocats. Not to be confused with The Aristocrats by Gilbert Gottfried. This movie came out in 1970 and saw its first VHS release in 1996, then another release in the year 2000, which is where I first saw it. Want to know something crazy? The same 30-year difference between when The Aristocats came out and Y2K is the exact same as The Lion King and the year that this video was made. If you were hype about The Lion King when it originally came out, then this is a reminder that you need to take some pain relievers for your back, and put an F in the comments while you're at it. The Aristocats was based on a true story about a Parisian family of cats, and was adapted from a story by Tom McGowan and Tom Rowe. This also just so happened to be the last animated feature to be approved by Walt Disney himself prior to his death. That means that this was also the first feature to be completed and released after the fact. It has been said that you can tell how essential Walt was to creating such animated feats, and how significant the gap was that he left behind. This movie came out in a different era, so there are some things in there that wouldn't be tolerated nowadays, and you may not even know most of the voice actors, except for a few, and that's not even by name, just by recognizing their voices from other things. It's interesting when you start looking into these people, because when you see their birth and death dates, you realize that some of them were born while it was still the Wild West. Or at the very least, they were raised in a time where legendary cowboys and gunslingers were still alive. Red Dead vibes. It's even more impressive when some of these people are still alive. It always throws me off. Everyone, including myself, was rooting for Betty White, but Angela Lansbury was not far behind, passing at age 96. As of the creating of this video, Mel Brooks is still alive at age 98, and Dick Van Dyke will be 100 in 2025. I don't care how old he is or what anyone says. Dick Van Dyke returning for a Diagnosis Murder reboot is exactly what I need in my life. Edgar is voiced by Roddy Maud Roxby. This character is a loyal butler to retired opera singer Madame Adelaide Bonfamille, voiced by Hermione Baddeley. Edgar comes off as a very butlerly fellow that does typical butler-esque things. Very proper, polite, and cultured. Nonetheless, he is not a very strong antagonist. In fact, he wouldn't even be considered a villain at all if it weren't for his greediness and impatience. Thus, he doesn't have any strength or abilities. He does, however, have a severe lack in experience to perform wrongdoings, leave minimal residual presence behind while doing so, and most importantly, get away unscathed. Since he isn't a downright evil scumbag, he appears to obtain some sort of moral compass when it comes to executing his mission, which in due course results in his downfall. Because if he was capable of offing things like other villains can, then this would have been wrapped up real quick. The flick opens in Paris, year 1910. We are introduced to Madame Adelaide, her cat Duchess, voiced by Eva Gabor, her kittens Burlois, Toulouse, and Marie, as well as noble butler Edgar and noble steed Frou Frou. All appears to be going well and everyone is happy. That is until the Madame's lawyer, Georges, rolls up in one of those fancy automobiles. He drives very safe, despite being an extreme liability while on foot. This guy's a lot of fun. He's hip to new technology and music. He is ancient, but his mind is still sharp enough to be trusted with people's affairs. Edgar has a horrific sequence of events transpire trying to get Georges safely up the stairs, which leaves him disheveled and out of breath while announcing his entrance to the Madame. They've known each other for a good chunk of their lives at this point, and after reminiscing about old times, they get down to business, creating her will. The Madame has no living relatives, and wishes to have her cats taken care of first and foremost after she passes. She trusts nobody but Edgar to do so, which is valid, because that's what he's doing now anyways. After the cats live out their lives and pass away, her vast wealth, including stocks, bonds, treasures, jewels, her mansion, country chateau, everything she owns would revert to Edgar. I don't know about you, but that sounds like an unbelievable deal if you ask me. Let's say Edgar is in his 40s. He would age into an early retirement smashingly once all the cats had passed on. Plus, it's not even like cats require a lot of maintenance anyways. He would still be able to live out a life of leisure even with the cats inheriting first. They would just become his pets. The cats aren't like in charge or anything. At the end of the day, they just need to be loved and looked after by someone who is loyal and trustworthy. As long as the cat's needs are met, then who cares what he does? Anyone would agree that this would be like hitting the jackpot and the best outcome for Edgar, who is not a world-known opera singer and did not earn that money. Being a butler, helping this extremely wealthy woman live her best life, and in return she hooks him up so he can live his best life. This is a deal you can't mess up. Can you? Edgar can. And he doesn't see any of it that way. He overhears this as he is dropping some eaves on the conversation through a pipe that connects the rooms. His reaction is to have a melty about the cats being put before him on paper. She literally says that everything is going to Edgar after they die, and he doesn't hear it. It's like he had to reboot during the time that she said it.
I simply wish to have the cats inherit first. Then, at the end of their lifespan, my entire estate will revert to Edgar.
Cats inherit first.
He's acting like it's going to take forever for the cats to die because he adds each cat's life consecutively, and he also factors in that cats have 9 lives each. He gets bummed out that he will be dead by the time he will receive the inheritance, without considering that the cats and 9 lives thing doesn't exactly work like that. And the kittens were all from the same litter, so it's going to be around the same time frame for all of them when they die, and some may even die sooner than others. Madame Adelaide appears to still be in good health. She could possibly outlive the cats anyways. Most illogical. That's why it's good to have at least one person in your life that you can talk to, so you can gauge a third-person perspective on if what you're feeling is well-founded, or if you're just being a dumbass. Imagine if Edgar confided in one of his butler friends over a pint.
Edgar, old boy, I do say that your current position is unequivocally bussing, old chap. Howbeit, I will call cap on this drivel, and not entertain the thought by informing you herewith that even conceiving such a noxious line of thought as to undergo this absurd catnapping plot is to admit that you are without doubt astronomically bonkers, my lad. My employer has 5 greedy, bratty children that are all on track to split the inheritance, and I will be lucky if one of them takes me in once he and the missus die. I wiped their bums, and that is how they will repay me. Those cunts!
I would imagine he would have a reality check before he even began his course of action. If he wouldn't have known, then nothing would have changed. He would have continued to faithfully buddle around without changing in any way. It's only upon finding out about the will that sends him spiraling. He comes to the conclusion that those cats have got to go. The next scene, we see interaction between Duchess and the kittens, and establish that they trust Edgar. The kittens are fancy, so they perform activities like painting and music lessons. Meanwhile, Edgar is preparing a concoction called Creme de la Creme à la Edgar, which includes an entire bottle of sleeping tablets that is more likely to put them in the type of sleep they won't wake up from, and a metric shit ton of vanilla. Edgar enters the room, places the bowls on the floor, and the cats start lapping it up. As he leaves the room, he says,
"Sleep well? I mean, eat well, of course."
Yeah, smooth move, man. Even though he's already messed up by initially thinking to do this in the first place, he can't even get past an objective without slipping up. A foreshadowing of things to come. A mouse that lives on the wall, named Roquefort, approaches them. He's voiced by Sterling Holloway, the guy who did Winnie the Pooh, Kaa, and the Cheshire Cat, among many other things. They're friends and allow him to partake in the sleep soup. The medication reacts quickly, and before long, Edgar is sneaking out of the house, a baby basket in hand, with the cats inside. He places them in the sidecar of his motorcycle, launchpad style. It doesn't take long for him to drive past the police station for things to totally unravel. He almost Bill Sykes himself by driving down the stairs to the metro. He's able to pull it together and makes his way to the countryside, where he plans on abandoning the cats because he can't bring himself to get his hands dirty. This is the best idea he could come up with to yield the desired outcome. He drives past a farm where 2 dogs hear him coming from a mile away. Lafayette, voiced by George Lindsay, and Pat Buttram is Napoleon. You recognize him for sure as Chief in The Fox and the Hound and the Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood. In fact, he has a crazy power dynamic thing going on with George Lindsay and Robin Hood as well. Honorable mentions. He's also this possum guy in a Goofy movie, and a guy in the saloon in Back to the Future 3. Napoleon uses his supersonic canine ears to perfectly describe the motorcycle, noting the 2-cylinder engine, chain drive, and a squeaky wheel in the front. He and Lafayette launch an attack on an unsuspecting Edgar, who has the most human reaction to the situation by immediately needing a change of pants. There's a reason Rue and I don't do dog parks or meetups. In the last decade, both he and I have had at least 4 traumatizing experiences, and that's probably a low number because multiple instances have happened with the same dogs. The problems mostly stem from the same breed, but with any given dog, it could be on site. Ruger is gigantic, so there's a lot of contenders for a blood sport tournament that he did not sign up for, and they all want a piece of him. And look at his face. He is never looking for the smoke. That dude just wants to be sweet, hang out, and eat treats. And he doesn't want to hang out with any ratchet dogs. I get that these hounds are out in the country and are protecting the land, but it's still not fun trying to be a passerby who's just trying to get by safely, and every time you gotta deal with this. Edgar predictably loses control and swerves down the embankment. Napoleon and Lafayette continue to give chase. This movie is subject to a lot more cartoon physics than we see in other animated films. It's thanks to this cartoon buffoonery that the dogs wind up in the sidecar. Edgar flips out and presents his ass to them. And Napo's like, "Don't mind if I do," and obliges by getting a big mouthful of that thing. Also, the handlebars are spinning, and the bike is not crashing. But in the heat of the moment, you don't think about it, because Napoleon chomps down on Edgar's cheeks again. In the exact same spot, too. That's gotta hurt. A lot more wacky and zany happenings take place throughout this scene, and I don't feel like explaining all of it. But basically it has to do with a windmill, the motorcycle and sidecar separating, a couple of times Edgar is in the air with his umbrella, his shoes slip off, and of course his suspenders have to come into play. Those are by far the bane of his existence. Edgar makes his getaway by driving into the stone windmill, and not only physically moving it, but breaking through, and it's still functioning, allowing him to ride away. His onion butt gets bitten no less than 3 times, and 2 of them result in confirmed ripping and tearing of trow.
The ripping and the tearing, the ripping and the tearing.
We already see way too much of this grown man's underwear as it is, but we gotta think about seeing his bare ass too? Thankfully we don't, because a part of the rules of the cartoon silliness is that his pants and shoes regenerate. Edgar completely f***ed up the entire operation. Not one thing has gone right for him. He not only failed to go far enough to assure the cats wouldn't be able to return, but he almost got himself mauled to death. And he left a bunch of evidence behind, like his hat, umbrella, the sidecar to his motorcycle, and the basket that he had the cats in. He also can't be staying up too late because he is a butler after all, and they're expected to show up and have things done. I can imagine a lot of them starting their day extremely early, because if you're too busy getting someone else's shit done, then when do you have time for your own? This sounds stressful, and completely unnecessary. A storm rolls in, and Duchess and the kittens have to spend the rest of the night in the basket. Madame Adelaide awakens due to a nightmare about them, and immediately checks on her pets, to discover them gone. She runs through the house screaming, and Edgar is nowhere to be found, and it's never brought up or suspicious or anything. However, Roquefort hears the commotion, and takes initiative to try to find them. The next morning we are introduced to J. Thomas O'Malley, the alley cat, voiced by Phil Harris, who did Baloo in the Jungle Book and Little John in Robin Hood. O'Malley offers his services to help because naturally he wants to get into Duchess's pants, but he still assists after he finds out about the kids. He even saves one within 5 seconds of parting ways, and decides to escort them back to Paris. We see Madame Adelaide is devastated by the loss of her cats, and that Roquefort was not successful in finding them either. Everyone is feeling down except one person, and you already know who it is. He's not even trying to hide it. They never explained what happened when the Madame was awake screaming throughout the house, and Edgar was nowhere to be found because he was still heading back. If the cats are gone, and he's nowhere to be found either, and returns alone looking like a disaster, I think that would make someone a little skeptical. No matter apparently, and it doesn't look incriminating at all as he joyfully enters the barn with a pep in his step singing. He boasts about his misdeeds by admitting to Frou Frou that he committed the catnapping, showing her the front page headline in the paper. Even though humans can't understand animals in this universe, animals can understand humans perfectly, and I think they can read. Because of this, Frou Frou and Roquefort are now aware of Edgar's plan as far as the catnapping is concerned. He continues to ramble about how the police think this was done by a professional, and that he did a masterful job. But he realizes that he left a smorgasbord of evidence behind at that farm. In order to remain in the clear, he needs to go back and get his things as soon as possible. As the cats journey onward, they come across some obstacles, and O'Malley is saved by 2 lady geese wearing bonnets. They are conveniently going to Paris too, and join the party on their travels. Once they get there, the geese meet up with a family member trying to escape with his life from a kitchen in a restaurant. His name is Uncle Waldo, and he is hammered because the chefs had marinated him in wine, and tore his ass feathers out in order to prepare him for that evening's menu. The geese waddle off, while O'Malley takes the cats to the home of his friend, Scat Cat, played by Scatman Crothers. Which houses a bunch of groovy alley cat musicians. And they know how to get down! After they jam, Duchess and O'Malley hit it off on the rooftops. Edgar has to get his stuff back, and that night he enters the barn with a fishing pole, hops on the motorcycle, and heads back to the farm with the dogs. Roquefort attempts to hitch a ride in the motorcycle's broken taillight, but that is short-lived as he is flung into the stratosphere. It's kinda hard to stay on when Edgar's main driving strategy is very sporadic. He pops an over-the-top wheelie with his legs in the air, all man-spread, before he gets on the road. Don't ever let him know your next move. It's pretty amazing he can get away with driving like this, swerving in barely any control of the vehicle. The bike is probably jacked up from all the abuse inflicted on it, but it may be possible that he is out of practice riding without a sidecar. He arrives and finds the dogs have made themselves quite at home with this stuff. Napoleon is sleeping in the sidecar while he wears Edgar's hat, and has the open umbrella attached to the horn. Lafayette is in the baby basket. Of course, Edgar almost gives himself away with his squeaky shoes, but he removes them and approaches with his fishing line from the top of the haystack. It takes a couple attempts, but Edgar gets a good start by collecting his hat and the basket. Napoleon is awake and knows something is up, as Edgar beefs it and falls. I'm not sure what's happening here, but it's gotta be that cartoon logic. It appears that the dogs are somehow gyrating, moving all fast, and this constitutes pushing Edgar's body into the haystack, hiding him without them noticing he's there. Napoleon blames it on Lafayette, but once they notice they're missing a few of their items, they are on alert and on the hunt to get some of that butler bubble butt. Lafayette accidentally steps into Edgar's shoes, and the squeak starts back up, causing hijinks. Edgar loads himself and the entire haystack into the sidecar, and balances that bitch on the one tire that is attached to one side. The hounds catch up to the one-wheeled haystack and jump in with furious anger. They collide with a wagon, sending the dogs and the haystack over, and they crash into a barn. They look on as Edgar makes his getaway, successfully stealing his stuff back, and reducing the amount of evidence that can be traced back to him. The next day, the cats have made it back home. Roquefort sees their approach, and excitedly leaves to share the news. As he runs by one of the rooms, he observes Edgar celebrating in the middle of the day, with a cigar and a bottle of champagne. Isn't he still on the clock? He says, "Get used to the finer things in life, and someday all of this will be yours." Okay, but not today. Madame Adelaide could walk in at any moment and see him smoking and getting sloshed, and propping his feet up on the piano. He could find himself reprimanded and immediately looking for another house to buddle that doesn't plan on leaving any wealth to him. Roquefort takes advantage of Edgar's sloppiness and ties his shoelaces together, before Edgar opens another bottle and he gets popped by the cork, crushing his rib cage and causing massive internal hemorrhaging. He sits there wondering where it all went wrong, as his body slowly bleeds out from the inside. Just kidding. It just knocks the wind out of him. The kittens begin meowing and scratching at the door while Duchess and O'Malley say goodbye. Edgar promptly freaks out and gets up, but his tied laces keep him from moving forward. Roquefort tries to warn them to stay away, but it's no use. They are all captured in a sack, and Edgar throws them in an unlit oven. Madame Adelaide is home and comes running because she heard meowing, but is once again disappointed when she finds that her pets are not there. The cats tell Roquefort to get O'Malley. He does so, catching up with him outside. O'Malley tells Roquefort to go get Scat Cat and the other alley cats, which is not the best situation for a mouse to find himself, but he does it bravely and is able to explain that O'Malley sent him before he is eaten. At that point, Roquefort is a made man, and they all rush to help. O'Malley watches Edgar make a phone call, and then he takes the sack into the barn, where he locks the cats in a trunk that he plans to have sent to Timbuktu, which is over 2,000 miles away in Africa, with no food or water. As he is pushing the trunk outside for pickup, O'Malley springs into action, getting the drop on him and closing the door. Edgar makes a move, but is stopped by Frou Frou grabbing his jacket. He rips it away and opens the door. Frou Frou keeps Edgar from pushing the trunk any further. He goes after O'Malley with a sickle and chases him up a ladder, but O'Malley pushes them off and they crash to the ground below. Edgar grabs a pitchfork and begins jabbing at the hay and destroying the barn. At this point I realize that he has finally resorted to taking life. If he had this commitment initially, he would be in a different situation. Edgar corners O'Malley and throws the pitchfork at him, like a spear, and for a second it looks like he got him. But O'Malley uses one of his 9 lives and escapes. Edgar opens the door yet again, and this time is greeted by all of the alley cats, who start tearing his ass up. Roquefort figures out the combination of the lock, but before they are released, Edgar makes one final stand, stating that they are going to Timbuktu if it's the last thing he ever does. One of the alley cats then unties a hay bale that was suspended, and it falls, crashing onto Edgar's head. He receives a concussion or some sort of head trauma from this, indicated by his eyes after the blow. But he's already in too deep, and there's no way to call a truce now. The cats throw a horse harness thingy around him, toss a bucket of water on his head, hook him up and pull him off the trunk, freeing Duchess and the kittens, and brought swinging toward Frou Frou, who winds up for a serious back kick, makes full contact, and launches Edgar into the trunk. A horse can kick the equivalent of 2,000 pounds at full force. This is more than enough pressure to break and fracture bones, cause immense swelling and bruising of soft tissue, and of course can be very, very lethal. A kick from a horse could even put someone into cardiac arrest. Back in high school, I had a teacher that boarded horses, and one year a horse kicked back, and the hoof barely grazed her forehead above her left eye. At first it wasn't a big deal, but then in no time a bunch of fluid drained down into her eye socket and gave her the gnarliest black eye that I have ever seen. It took like 6 months to a year to fully go away. You got to appreciate the size of these creatures, because it could go bad very quickly. We don't get to see too much of how Edgar takes to this punishment, because the trunk is quickly closed, locked, picked up, and thrown in the back of the truck that will start him on his long journey. Remember that Edgar just received severe head trauma and is restrained, with a bucket on his head, on his knees, cramped in that trunk, similar to the scavenger's daughter. That will not be opened until well after it shows up in Africa, with a smell emanating from it. Oh yeah, he is definitely dead. There's no way he survived. It would be an unsolved mystery too, because who would do this and why? Not to mention it's 1910. So there's no way they'll figure it out. At the end, O'Malley joins the family, and the will has to be altered because Edgar vanished, and Madame Adelaide has no idea where he went, forcing her to remove him from it. She even states that if Edgar had known about the will, then he would never have left. Instead, she's going to use her money to start a foundation to provide a home for all of the alley cats of Paris, which still doesn't solve her issue of finding a reliable person to take care of said cats. But whatever, if the movie doesn't care about it, then neither do I. The end. Edgar should have just stayed in his lane and not worry about taking advantage of his proprietress. She seems really cool to work for, and it looks like you can get away with a lot without her knowing or caring. He was perfectly fine with his lot in life and had no ill intention toward her or her cats. But once he found out about the will, he became irrational and made one mistake after another. You can see near the end that it all went to his head, resorting to day drinking on the job and not being very butlerly. His mindset was way off. I also personally think that he underwent a terrible end, as he suffered massive trauma, was restrained and trapped in a claustrophobic nightmare, where he writhed, hunched over on his knees in pain, confined to this small space until he succumbed to his injuries, or if he was lucky, ran out of air. This might be one of the most fucked up Disney deaths now that I think about it, and it's so low-key. You simply laugh at the man who got his butt kicked into a trunk, and then you don't think about what happens to him after that. Brutal! I don't know much about the storybook, but apparently in that, Madame Adelaide finds out what Edgar did to her cats, and he gets fired and written out of the will that way. Either option here sucks, but you can get fired multiple times. and you can only die once. So here it is Disney that is taking the violence to the next step from the original stories, and not the other way around. Howdy everyone, this is Dave, and I have a diabolically evil Disney villain that I want to talk about. This video will cover the Horned King, from Disney's 25th animated feature film, The Black Cauldron. This movie came out on July 24th, 1985, and is an adaptation based on the first 2 books of the Chronicles of Prydain series, written by Lloyd Alexander. The Book of 3 and The Black Cauldron. I did not grow up with this movie in my life, and the same goes for the books. So my first time checking them out was for the purpose of creating this video. I grew up in a strict religious household, and even though I could get by with most Disney movies, there were a few where it was like, absolutely not. And this one would have been on that list, if it was even on the radar to begin with. I don't actually remember hearing anything about this movie until its VHS release in 1998. All I knew about it came from commercials, and honestly, I had zero interest in watching it. I didn't even know about the production hell it went through, or that it was a massive flop at the box office, grossing $21.3 million on a $44 million budget. And them spending that much on this movie almost destroyed the company. It was the first animated feature to be given a PG rating, and that brought some controversy with its younger audiences. The older audiences didn't mind though. Watching this recently, I thought some of the sequences were pretty rad. But you already know there were little kids and parents that thought differently. The Horned King is voiced by John Hurt, and this is one of the most vile and unapologetically evil Disney villains ever. Disney's adaptation of the character differs from the Horned King in the books in basically every way. He is a great warrior draped in crimson, who is god tier at riding and swordsmanship, donning a mask made from a human skull with fierce antlers fixed on top. I'm not sure if he has any mystical abilities or if it's just his level 100 in intimidation, but he freaks everyone out. The Disney version is a horrid, emaciated creature of a paranormal variety. Decaying skin draped over a skeletal frame. He's got some long-ass nails, and his head is depicted as a legit rotting skull, containing a jacked-up grill and red eyes. This version also wears crimson, a cloak with the hood up, his horns protruding from the cloth. He sports a fur stole wrapped around his bony shoulders. Many consider Disney's Horned King to be a lich, or some sort of demonic entity, indubitably in the undead category. Since this adaptation is a scary skeleton, and not a scary dude with bloody arms and a skull mask with antlers. My question is, whose skull is that? Imagine having a mask made out of someone else's head. The flick opens up with the fade-in shot of the Black Cauldron, with exposition provided to us via voiceover, about an evil king that everyone was afraid of, including the gods. They don't say his name, but it's meant to be the spirit of Arin Deathlord, who is a sorcerer and plays a much larger role throughout the books. They kinda switch roles, and the Horned King shares more of Arin's character traits. Unable to be contained in something as simple as a prison, he eventually met his gnarly fate by being thrown into a crucible of molten iron. His body was incinerated by the intense heat, and his spirit was captured, taking the form of a BBC. That means Big Black Cauldron. For many hundreds of years, the Black Cauldron remained hidden, which is for the best because the only people out searching for it want to use it for evil things, mainly its power to resurrect an army of deathless warriors. The army of the dead would have no problem overwhelming the opposition and carving a path of destruction to the throne. So yeah, it is in everyone's best interest to not let this happen. It is a very serious matter. We're presented an establishing shot of an ideal setup. This house in the woods with a river running in front of it is something I'd totally live in. Especially in a Disney movie because for the most part there aren't any bugs. Most certainly no mosquitoes or fucking ticks. The house belongs to a wizard named Caer Dallben, who has a bad feeling about the return of the Horned King. Dallben is the keeper of an oracular pig named Henwin, and has an assistant pig keeper named Taran that lives there too. Even though Taran will go on to have character development, the version we get here is level 1, hasn't played the tutorial, and doesn't know shit about shit. He is daydreaming about the awful thought of the war being over before he is old enough to fight in it, not considering all of the horrific implications that go along with war. Dalbin knows this all too well, and recognizes how blind Taran is to the dangers ahead. His age is never specifically given, but I'd say he's around 13 or 14. He's at that age where he already wants to be grown up and doing heroic things. He's not a fan of his lot in life of being an assistant pig keeper. The communication in that house must be lacking because Taran doesn't understand the reason why Henwin is such a big deal. And he wasn't taught values such as humility. He's a hotshot that thinks very highly of himself and is very arrogant in abilities that he has yet to put into practice. Not only is that annoying to watch, but he takes the Skywalker approach and comes off as whiny, even more so in the books. He thinks of himself as the god's gift to Prydain, and can't help but tell everyone about it. That's pretty true to his character in the books, as the first thing he does in the Book of 3 is whine and complain about making horseshoes when he wants to make a sword. Henwin starts tripping, so Dalbin orders Taran to bring the pig inside. After performing the ritual to activate Henwin's powers, they see a vision of the Horned King and his Gwythaints, searching for the Black Cauldron. Dalbin tells Taran about the Black Cauldron and the Horned King's intentions of domination. The party is over when the vision shows them that he is also seeking out the oracular pig. Dalbin orders Taran to take Henwin to another cabin to hide, as he wraps up the most pathetic provisions possible. Just an apple and a small slice of bread. I thought he was going to give him the whole loaf, but nope, just the end piece.
The rest is for me.
Taran continues to spout his ignorance about the terrible threat, and says that he is not afraid of the Horned King, to which Dalbin calls him a foolish fuckface. After goodbyes are said, both Taran and Henwin begin their journey. This differs from the book in basically every way. Instead, Henwin gets out of the pen and takes off, Taran giving chase. This is where he sees the Horned King for the first time, galloping on his horse, searching. Then he meets Prince Gwydion, and travels with him for a bit. In their short time together, Taran has to take things into account that he never thought of before, such as a hero having to sleep on the ground, or not judging another hero based on appearance over merit. He is put in his place multiple times by the experienced warrior, and if anything, proves to be a burden and a liability. There are several characters that were left out of the Disney adaptation, but I just wanted to mention Gwydion and how badass he is. Literally a textbook definition of heroism, with his kindness, compassion, and cool logical approach being greater assets than his ability to kick your ass. I'd be cool with an entire book about just him. Back to the movie. We see a dark castle and Gwythaints flying by. The first glimpse we see of this video's topic is his horned silhouette. He moves slowly down the stairs and stops at a pit of bodies that have been decomposing to nothing but skeletons. He has a monologue about being powerful and using the cauldron to raise the piles of bones up as Cauldronborn, which essentially means that the skeletons will be reanimated by the power of the cauldron and then be used to start fighting everything. He also wants to be worshipped, so he is getting off big time on the thought of having an undead army treat him as a god. We aren't given much detail on whose skeletons these are, or if they would be agreeing to any of this if they were still alive. That would be messed up to have your enemy keep your corpse around after you were long dead, and then later use your skeleton to do their bidding. As Taran and Henwin continue their journey, Taran can't help but give himself all of the flowers. If that's not annoying enough, he loses Henwin, and then that leaves us wide open to be introduced to a character that is even more exasperating than Taran. It is a hairy, matted up creature with a creepy stash named Gurgi. I really didn't know anything about this movie before I watched it, and as soon as this guy appeared on screen, I was like, oh. What were they thinking having not one, but two unlikable characters in the same movie? And every time he's on screen, I can't wait for him to leave. Thankfully, he isn't in it as much as he could have been. Taran hears Henwin screaming, and rushes to find her being snatched up by the Gwythaints, and he totally beefs it trying to save her. He climbs up the jagged terrain to get a better view of where they went, and he sees the Horned King's castle in the distance. He has no choice but to infiltrate. As he is climbing up the stone of the castle, some of the wall gives way, and he is able to slip through the hole. All I can think of this scene is something out of Elder Scrolls. He finds the dining hall where all of the Horned King's goons are eating, drinking, and enjoying some entertainment, in celebration of catching Henwin. A goblin named Creeper is the Horned King's second in command. And right away we know he receives zero respect from anyone. He takes shit from both his master and his subordinates, even though he outranks them. This guy with the bone appears to have a very lax gag reflex. Reminds me of like 2007 being at the Renaissance Festival, eating a drumstick, and some dude working there shouts,
"You're quite good at sucking that meat down, my lord."
Then looked at my girlfriend at the time and was like,
"You better watch out for him, my lady."
Hit me with the incendiary round. He wasn't wrong though. I was tearing that thing up. Taran watches from his hiding spot, catching the Horned King's entrance, and it totally changes the vibe of the party. Creeper starts kissing bony ass cheeks, and overzealously tries to command Henwin to use her abilities, but she ain't having any of that. So Creeper instead attempts to drown her out of self-preservation, because Creeper is blamed for anything that goes wrong, and is constantly on the receiving end of severe punishment. We see him being abused by the Horned King on a regular basis, and it seems like his favorite form of punishment is with his skeletal hand around his throat. Creeper takes a red-hot coal from the fire with a pair of tongs, and approaches Henwin. Taran has to do something, so he may as well draw all the attention to himself, by falling from his hiding spot and causing a disruption. He better be terrified. Each and every one of these guys could hew him in two with no problem. One of them almost pokes his guts out. The Horned King deduces that Taran is the keeper of the oracular pig, and tells him to get Henwin to spill it on the whereabouts of the Black Cauldron. Taran states that he can't do that. At least he shows some backbone here, because he has all but let them complete their mission at this point. He swiftly changes his mind for good reason, after the Horned King sends the poor sow to the chopping block. This part is awful. This adorable pig is jarringly out of place in this dingy, hopeless setting. But let's just analyze this for a second. There is a chopping block in the mess hall, where people are eating. Not very sanitary. There's also bloodstains on the wood, indicating that this has been used before. And if it's been used before, then I'm assuming it's been used hundreds of times. This may, in fact, be a replacement for the first block that got worn down from frequency of use. There's a full-time executioner wearing a black hood, holding an axe, waiting at the ready to lop someone's dome off. They have it down to a science because the Horned King doesn't even have to say anything. He just shatters his chalice, and that's enough to get the ball rolling. I bet Creeper was responsible for quite a few soldiers being offed, since he is in constant fight or flight, and has to throw everything under the bus just to stay alive for a while longer. Anyways, Taran can't bear to have his pig chopped up, and neither can we. So he says that he will get Henwin to do her thing. Taran begins the ritual, and a vision of the Black Cauldron appears. This excites the Horned King because it confirms that the cauldron actually exists, which I guess is something he was unsure about, even though he's been obsessing over it. He gets up from his throne and inches toward them, instructing the boy to tell him where it is. He then jump scares Taran by coming at him with outstretched hands and red eyes.
Never should have come here.
Taran fearfully runs, stepping on the bowl and flinging the contents at the Horned King, which apparently hurts him real bad, because he writhes in pain. Taran grabs Henwin and makes a run for it. After avoiding capture, they reach the roof and Taran pushes Henwin off of the ramparts and into the moat below. Before Taran can join her, he is grabbed by Creeper and locked in the dungeon. He doesn't stay there for long, because he is rescued by Princess Elanwe, who was also being held prisoner, and her golden peladrin, or bauble, basically a magical sentient floating orb thing. Princess Elanwe is a pleasant addition to the story, because unlike Taran, she is much more intelligent, competent, and most importantly, not annoying. In fact, I feel bad for her having to deal with this guy. In the book, she gets some great jabs in, but it's rather tame here. She doesn't roast him for being an assistant pig keeper. She just takes his occupation as someone who simply can't help her escape, and she will have to continue to rely on herself. She does offer to let him come along though, which he gladly accepts, The magical sphere is very helpful as they make their way through the dark. They stumble upon the burial chamber of a great warrior, whom was the king of the castle before the Horned King took it over. There is a deleted scene that gives a little backstory. They repurposed Prince Gwydian's name and refer to the deceased as King Gwydian. Taran takes note of the warrior's sword and can't help but swoop it. They see a couple of other things, like Creeper open the door for a man hauling a cart of skeletons into the castle, and an old bard named Fluter Flam being locked up in another dungeon that seems to be a special place for bards. Fluter is met with his gruesome end face to face as he sees the skeleton of a fellow bard locked up just like he is. He shouldn't expect company anytime soon, because it seems like the punishment towards bards is to lock them up and simply forget. Fluter has a magical harp that he carries around his neck. The harp practically plays itself. Just pluck one string and it plays a beautiful melody. But whenever Fluter lies, the harp breaks one of its strings, and he has to spend a lot of time repairing them. This isn't elaborated upon in the movie or the books, but this harp seems to understand what's going on, and is able to show some sort of expression. Is there a person trapped inside that thing? Has a soul been locked away in that inanimate object, and the only way it can communicate its disdain is by doing damage to itself? How long has it been like this? How did Fluter come to own it? Nobody questions anything about the harp, except that they know it's a bullshit detector for a very dishonest bard. Taran falls and drops the sword off a bridge, and comes face to face with one of the brutes that slaps the spirit out of him. The dude starts swinging his axe, but Taran dodges it enough to grab the sword and block an oncoming blow. If it had been any other sword, you know that powerful swing would have plowed right through that pitiful pig boy's defenses. But this isn't just an ordinary sword. I think it's pronounced Drimwin. This enchanted sword is very powerful, and when the edge strikes something, it emits a great blazing energy that can easily destroy just about anything. The brute's axe shatters into pieces, and he runs away. The sword is essential to their escape.
Never should have come here.
And eventually all three of them get out. That doesn't bode well for Creeper, who knows he will get blamed for them escaping, and will be punished for it. However, he is pleasantly surprised when the Horned King does not choke him out, and instead tells him to send the Gwythaints after them. The next scene shows Taran, Elanwe, and Fluter sitting next to a river. Taran's head inflates, bragging that it was him who got them out of the castle, and that it takes a great warrior to handle the sword. Taran starts talking down to Elanwe, and says girls can't do stuff, but she puts him in his place, considering it was her who broke him free, and that he would still be rotting in that dungeon if it wasn't for her. The spat ends in tears, but they get past it. It's a relatively short conflict in the movie, but in the books they are constantly at each other's throats. It becomes a burden after a while, and actually Elanwe is the one who takes charge of the sword. Taran doesn't even get to touch it until later on. Gurgi shows up and starts causing trouble. Before he is sent away, he informs the party that he saw pig tracks and can lead them to Henwin. Gurgi takes him to the fair folk, and Henwin is safe. In the book, Doli is a dwarf that helps them along their journey, but in this movie, he's a fairy with anger issues that leads them to the Marches of Morva, where the Black Cauldron is located. Eventually, they find a house that belongs to 3 witches, and it's teeming with frogs. Come to find out, the witches have no problem turning people into amphibians. Fluter catches one of the witches' fancy, and she offers to pluck his harp. He's changed from human to frog and back a few times, and some of these visuals are messed up. Trying to boil him alive and eat him. Look at his expression. He winds up finding solitude between the witch's massive jugs.
Boo!
Which I'm sure out of all of the awful deaths that could befall him on this quest, that's one of the better ways to go.
Bright lights, big titties,
The witches offer to trade Taran's sword for the Black Cauldron, and he accepts. In the book, they don't want anything that they have to offer, except a magic brooch that Taran got from another character that died. The brooch empowers the person wearing it with wisdom, visions, and dreams. It was a heavy cost. In the book, they also find the Black Cauldron in a shed outside the witch's house. The witches also go into a lot more detail about wanting to turn them into frogs. They must really enjoy doing that to people. Talk about them not having a care in the world after that except for all of the predators that will eat them. The witches also talk about Dalbin and how they raised him from a baby. They provide some backstory on how he got his magical powers. Apparently they were making a wisdom potion and he was helping them stir. The kettle boiled over and some of it burned Dalbin's fingers, and he immediately put them in his mouth as a reaction. After that, he knew everything that the witches knew, and he had to leave shortly after that. None of that happens in the movie. It's just a straight trade between the cauldron and the magic sword. Taran and the gang receive the Black Cauldron, but unfortunately there's not much they can do with it, because in order to destroy the thing, someone has to willingly climb into it and sacrifice their life. Nobody's gonna do that. And the thing's massive, so they're just stuck with it. Dolly snaps on them like an a-hole and dips. Good. Take your unpleasantness someplace else and get some Marcus Aurelius in your life while you're at it. The Gwythaints and soldiers show up and take possession of the Black Cauldron, capturing everyone except Gurgi. They are taken back to the Horned King's castle, and Taran, Elanwe, and Fluter are forced to watch as the Horned King sets a skeleton inside of the cauldron. A green mist/slimy substance covers the collection of skeletons that are laying across the floor, and they are reanimated. The living are terrified and flee once the Cauldron-born attack them. There's a quick sequence where 3 skeletons are leaping onto 2 men. Originally, there was an extra part where you see the body melt, but it was removed. My favorite part is seeing how unfazed they are after seeing this happen. If this gruesome sequence was left in, just the softest
It's horrible.
from Elanwe, which doesn't seem weird with the theatrical edit we got, but it would be out of place if she said that after seeing some bodies liquefy. The Horned King orders the undead army to go forth and destroy everything. His mission appears to be complete, and he basks in his greatest triumph of sitting back and letting all of his henchmen complete his tasks for him. He literally does nothing. Gurgi sneaks into the castle and rescues the gang. Taran decides that he needs to sacrifice himself to end this once and for all. Gurgi stops him and jumps in himself. I know this is supposed to be sad and whatnot, but I just have no attachment to these 2 characters whatsoever. They both could jump in and I wouldn't give a crap. Gurgi's sacrifice undoes the Cauldron-born ritual, and the army begins falling. Taran tells Elanwe and Fluter to leave because he thinks there might be a chance to save Gurgi, and I'm not sure how, because nothing like that was ever discussed. But either way, the cauldron begins sucking all of the air out of the room. Taran has to grab onto a pillar as the Horned King enters choking Creeper. He doesn't seem to be affected by the wind tunnel that's going on in there. He grabs the kid and picks him up by the face. Taran, still holding onto the ring in the wall, pushes off with his feet and throws the Horned King off balance. This is enough to get him caught in the wind. He tries to satisfy the cauldron by throwing Taran in it. That doesn't work, and the Horned King gets pulled toward it, unable to escape. That thing does not discriminate, as it will gladly devour him just as much as anyone else. The Horned King cries out and even curses the cauldron, but none of that is going to help. His hands grasp the rim, but the force is so powerful that it begins ripping his cloak and even the skin off of his bones. That is an interesting detail for me. We can see that the horns are an actual part of his anatomy. The rest of him is engulfed in flames and annihilated right on the spot. Nothing but fragments are left. Creeper is horrified by what happened to his master, but only for like 2 seconds. He's actually ecstatic and doesn't know what to do with himself. He hops on one of the Gwythaints and flies away. The cauldron begins to melt down and crumble the castle, but everyone else makes it out. The witches show up wanting the cauldron back and offer the sword in trade. But instead, Taran asks them to bring Gurgi back from the dead. We don't have to worry about it too much though, because the movie wraps up with them heading back to Dalbin's place for what I'm assuming is the next adventure. But we'll never see it because they never made another one. The end. I'm surprised at how much was changed from the original source material. The Horned King's death is much different in the Book of Three. 4 of the Horned King's soldiers catch up to Taran, Fluter, Elanwe, Gurgi, and Doli the dwarf. They defend themselves and shoot 2 of the soldiers in the neck with arrows, causing the rest to retreat. Later that night they have to duck and hide because a slew of soldiers are holding torches, riding through, searching for them. They can't go anywhere without running into the Horned King's men. Within no time they're found out, and Taran and Elanwe flee on Malengar, the horse. As they break for the brow of a hill, only one rider is following them. Taran looks over his shoulder and sees antlers. The Horned King was following them, gaining on them too. His black steed stays on top of them as they ride through the trees. Eventually he rides ahead and cuts them off, sending Taran and Elanwe flying from Malengar's saddle. The Horned King turns back and charges. Taran holds up his sword as the Horned King's blade comes crashing down on it, shattering to pieces. Taran rushes to Elanwe and grabs the hilt of Dernwyn, but it wouldn't come out of the sheath. He ends up turning with it, and his whole arm explodes in a magical blast. The sword flies out of Taran's hand, and he falls to the ground. Elanwe throws herself at the Horned King, but he tosses her aside. Before he can get the killing blow, Prince Gwydion appears and tells the Horned King his real name, which he learned from Henwin. This is essentially the ultimate finishing move, and the Horned King is struck by a flash of lightning, and his body bursts into flames. His mask melts, like molten iron. I'm not sure if he comes back later because he was never viewed as the greatest threat in the story, and he doesn't interact with the Black Cauldron either. It's another character, King Morgant, that tries to summon Cauldronborn and do stuff that aligns more with the film. A good amount of the movie is basically the Book of Three, and I was not expecting to find such little taken from the Black Cauldron itself. Creeper isn't in the books, but there is a really douchey character named Eladir that appears in the Black Cauldron, who is the one calling Taran Pig Boy all the time. I'm keeping it brief, but this guy is pretty terrible throughout the entire book. He does a redeeming thing at the end though. Eladir selflessly throws himself into the cauldron instead of Gurgi, but the way he does it is pretty epic. King Morgant's taken aback by Eladir charging the cauldron, like what is this guy doing, and begins shouting, "Slay him! Slay him!" to his soldiers. One even stabs him before he jumps in. Ultimately, the Disney adaptation of the Horned King is a ruthless and demonic being that is without mercy. His evil knows no bounds, as he wishes to rule over a hellscape with an undead army at his disposal. This guy has bad news written all over his ugly face, and he needed to just go away. The Horned King made a few appearances afterwards, in games and the House of Mouse. He also played a role in the Cinderella ride at Tokyo Disneyland. He's got a cool look to him, and is definitely among the more mature Disney villains that the company ever created. Howdy everyone, this is Dave, and I have a dreadful Disney villain that I want to talk about. Percival C. McCleach, from Disney's 29th animated feature film, The Rescuers Down Under. This was released on November 16th, 1990, the same day as Home Alone.
Not even close, bitch.
Which negatively affected the box office numbers. There was also one person that couldn't care less because he was in both movies. This was one of the first Disney movies my family owned. It was like this and The Little Mermaid. So it has been around since as long as I can remember, and it set the standard for quality animation and stunning visuals in my kid brain. This is a sequel to The Rescuers from 1977, and I did not know that until many years later. The first one was released onto VHS in 1992, after I already had the second one, and since there was no internet and nobody told me different, I didn't stand a chance. I wondered why a sequel would look like it was made in the same era as the Aristocats compared to Down Under, which has a bunch of amazing sequences using a combination of classic and digital techniques. The Rescuers Down Under was the first film for a lot of artists that made up the third wave of animators at Disney. They were taught by the second wave, who were taught by the original animators that were there back when the company began. And needless to say, they went pretty hard on this. George C. Scott, who is actually said to have been an animal lover, voices McCleach, a cruel and pitiless poacher that has no moral compass. This guy is sadistic and finds delight in making others miserable, smiling and singing with glee as he performs acts of torture for his own amusement. As a kid, he mainly stuck out to me because of how awesome his truck is, and I still kind of want it, even though it would not be practical whatsoever. I knew he was a bad person, but there's never a moment where he switches to savage mode or transforms into a monster, so I never classified him as one of the really bad villains. He also has a humorous side to him, so he always seemed a little less intimidating, even though he could snap at any moment. Dude is very unstable. Watching this again as an adult, I realized the immorality and sinister nature of this character. He has no redeeming qualities. This man is not only a scumbag because he poaches and tortures animals, but he is almost guaranteed to be physically and verbally abusive. His antisocial behavior extends to those that are loyal to him, and not just towards animals, but even his fellow man. He has no qualms with inflicting his wrath on innocent children either, and the ripple effect of that would extend to the parents. It would be terrifying to come across a deranged madman like this. The feature begins in Australia, with one of the most epic opening shots ever created in animation. A boy named Cody wakes up and sneaks out of the house in a rush. After a brief convo with his mom, he drops the accent and books it into the forest, following the call of a kangaroo that is blowing into a fallen log. It's so cute seeing all the animals within earshot showing up to see what's going on. Even if they'd be totally useless in the situation, it's cool they still want to help. Cody is like a little Steve Irwin and has a passion for protecting animals. It's an added bonus that he also has the ability to communicate with them, similar to Penny from the first one. The call for aid is for a massive eagle named Marahute that was caught in a poacher's trap on top of a very high cliff. Cody hops on the kangaroo's back, and they take off with the other animals following them. I never really thought much about Cody interacting with a kangaroo before, but in this day and age, my opinion of them has been spoiled by stuff I've seen on social media, like using their sharp claws on their feet to eviscerate something, or if you see a kangaroo standing in a body of water, don't go near it, because it's waiting patiently for you to come out there, so it can try to drown you.
I'm gonna punch your head in. Look at my dog.
This world has both anthro and non-anthro animals, but for the most part, non-anthro animals can still show expression and some even talk. They just don't wear clothes or have jobs. Cody is cool with all of them, but what if he's out there one day and comes across a non-anthro that isn't cool with him at all? That'd be scary as f*** to stumble upon a creature that is obviously angry to see you and tells you all about how he's going to eat you alive before actually trying to do it. It just seems extra psychological to have a wild animal acting wild while being able to communicate how it feels. Anyways, they arrive at the base and Cody starts free climbing with no equipment. This kid is fearless. He eventually reaches Marahute, still caught in the trap.
That's a huge bitch.
Cody tries to reassure the eagle that he means no harm, but she understandably starts losing it, and it doesn't get any better once he pulls out his pocket knife. Cody cuts the ropes while Marahute is flailing about. He runs to the edge of the cliff and cuts the last rope. The excitement is short-lived as the massive bird of prey opens its wings and knocks the kid over the edge. The feeling of absolute helplessness. The expressions Cody gives are of horror, and he's even shown crying as he falls headfirst to the fast-approaching ground. Thankfully, Marahute shows up and saves him from going splat. From there, they go up and away, leaving the other animals behind. After some breathtaking sequences of them flying in the sky, Marahute brings Cody back to her nest. She trusts Cody and shows him the 3 eggs waiting to be hatched. They have a moment and Cody finds out that Marahute's mate is no longer alive. He sympathizes and states that his dad is gone too. After they cover the eggs back up, and she lets him keep one of her golden feathers, she takes him back to solid ground. After goodbyes are said, Cody takes off through the forest. He runs past a tree that has a wanted sign posted, with the menacing face of this video's topic. He hears something, and discovers a mouse tied to a bell. The branch it's tied to is arced, and tied to something else. Despite the mouse's best efforts to warn him to stay away, Cody insists on helping, simultaneously springing a trap upon releasing the little dude. Cody falls into a massive pit, with an old blinking light. The mouse he's saved then tries to save Cody by lowering a vine to help him climb. But it's no use. The blinking light was a signal, and this unfortunate timetable brings a colossal truck, hauling ass, disrupting nature, getting some sick airtime that only a Disney villain can pull off, and drifting its heavy treads over the vine, breaking it, and keeping Cody in the pit. Then out of nowhere, a big face appears from over the ledge. The greenish-blue, non-anthro-monitor lizard named Joanna roars at Cody as her master approaches. If you couldn't tell by the spectacle he made of himself while pulling up, Percival is very enthusiastic about his line of work, especially the killing part.
You just got killed by a
damn poacher.
Motherfucker! How you like me now, huh?
McCleach is a middle-aged guy who's always sporting an earth-toned outfit with a brown vest and hat. Occasionally he wears a brown trench coat. He doesn't seem to have any other accomplices aside from Joanna. If the only human contact he has are people that he sells his hides to, then that's messed up. The isolation and only being around animals could deteriorate his mental state considerably, obviously affecting his judgment. He thinks that a large animal fell into his trap, but his demeanor quickly changes when he discovers a child. Within seconds of being on screen, we are given a glimpse into the type of person this is. He abuses Joanna and blames the pit on her, saying that she's always trying to bury squirrels out there. Without any filter, Cody's like, and says that the pit is a trap, and that poaching is against the law, immediately labeling himself as a narc. Percy gaslights Cody, telling him that he's been in that hole too long, pointing the barrel of his customized Winchester model 1912 shotgun at him.
Hey, you mind taking that gun out of my face? Please, really.
Smiling as he tells him to grab a hold so that he can pull him up and out. This guy is sadistic through and through, even when he's being helpful or joking around. After intimidating Cody and pulling him out of the pit, he gives him another chance by calling the pit a lizard hole and telling him to be on his way. Cody isn't having it and tells him to wake up and smell the shit he's shuffling, calling him out for being a poacher and setting the trap. Meanwhile, Joanna looks up and notices the mouse Cody saved. She throws Cody on the ground and begins attacking his backpack, knocking McCleach into the lizard hole. He climbs out angry and aims his shotty at Joanna, about to blow her away. It's so sad because she sees him aiming at her with an angry mug and she has to accept her fate, covering her eyes and shaking. She's lucky because McCleach's attention is diverted once he notices the golden feather hanging from Cody's bag. After being within seconds of offing his most loyal companion, he turns it around completely and calls her a good girl, and she reacts to his praises. Talk about a messed up relationship. Going from one extreme to the other and never knowing if you'll be alive in 5 minutes on a whim for literally any reason, and yet no reason at all. He asks about the feather, and Cody replies saying that it was a present. McCleach says that there's no need to keep secrets because he knows about the golden eagles. In fact, he was the one responsible for offing the father. At this point, Cody being able to just walk away is off the table, as McCleach now wants Cody to show him where the mother and eggs are. Cody slips away, Joanna in hot pursuit. He runs to the edge of a cliff with water and crocodiles below. Cody pulls out his knife, but with the adrenaline pumping, it slips from his hand and he is stopped before he can get it. Cody threatens McCleach with his mom calling the Rangers, but Percival isn't bothered in the slightest. He mocks him before tossing his bag into the water, and he watches in shock as it is torn up. McCleach tells Cody that his mom will think he was eaten by the crocs. He abducts the child and keeps him in the cage on the back of his truck. Thankfully, the mouse he saved escaped the backpack before it became croque cuisine, and it rushes to the nearest telegraph office for the Rescue Aid Society. Which is a milk carton fastened to an upside-down boot. The mouse comes in hot, shouting that McCleach took a little boy. The chonky mouse rushes to his station and begins transmitting the message. This part was always one of my favorites. I love watching the relay. All the different locations and scenarios in which they have to pass the word along. Like, is this cute little dude running his communications through Amelia Earhart's plane? It all looks so primitive now, and it shows how much work it used to take and why people made careers out of it. Our modern technology is so instant and expansive that if this were made today, they could text someone in the bathroom halfway around the world, and they would get it in a flush. The message bounces around and finally lands in New York City. It is considered a code red situation, and the RAS gather for an urgent meeting. The Rescue Aid Society is an international organization made up of mice that act in response to calls for help. I love how this guy is shocked by the Canadian mouse showing up in his PJs. My man in his Ebenezer Scrooge drip was probably snoring like honk chew just a few minutes ago. All he needs is a candle holder. Nowadays, everyone would be on a webcam wearing PJs. They already know who they're gonna send, but it appears that they are the only mice that haven't shown up for the meeting. Bianca, voiced by Eva Gabor, representing Hungary, and Bernard, voiced by Bob Newhart, for the USA. They aren't there because they are having a fancy romantic dinner, where Bernard is planning on popping the question. Bernard simps hard for Bianca, ever since they headed off on their first mission. You can't blame the guy. She single-handedly got him promoted from a janitorial role, and she's way out of his league. Bernard comes off as an unconfident fellow and gets steamrolled easily, but then he redeems himself with sudden bouts of assertiveness and being a lion-hearted mouse of action when he needs to be. Proposing to someone is a very nerve-wracking experience, even if you're doing it with no one else around and you know what the answer is going to be. But in movies, they just like to throw proposals around without the characters talking about it beforehand. I wouldn't know if they've talked about it, but it doesn't appear to be on Bianca's radar, and all I gotta say is that trope isn't a normal thing to do in real life. If they are together and have not discussed the possibility of marriage yet, then one of the most foolish things you can do is carry on, without already knowing for sure that the answer is going to be yes. You can't cold call something like that. It's dumbass conduct, especially in a public place. And before the food gets there, what are you gonna do if the answer is no? As he is working up the courage to propose, he realizes that the ring slipped through a hole in his pocket, and it is now rolling away. As he goes to grab it, a telegram of the Cody situation is brought to their table by the cricket maitre d', Francois. Bianca says that she needs to tell Bernard at once, and they must leave that night. Francois tells her that he will tell him immediately, and he scurries off. A casualty of circumstance, the cricket isn't able to tell Bernard, and when he gets back to the table, he thoughtlessly answers yes when Bianca asks if he talked to him. A misunderstanding ensues, and they are talking about two totally different topics, while thinking they are on the same page. Bianca about the mission and Bernard about marriage. He is brought up to speed when Bianca announces to the entire society that they have accepted the mission to Australia. The weather is atrocious for flying, but they can't afford to wait, considering it will take like 22 hours to get there. They go to Albatross Air, as they've done in the past. Unfortunately, Jim Jordan, the guy who voiced Orville in the first one, passed away before this film was released. So instead they talk to his nephew Wilbur, voiced by John Candy. Wilbur heard all about Bianca from his uncle Orville, and will do anything for them, once the weather clears. He needs some convincing, but after they tell him that a child has been abducted, he decides to brave the elements and take them that night. There is a comical sequence of events with Wilbur trying to get down the runway in a blizzard before he drops off the edge and heads into a nosedive. This cowabunga shot is simply incredible. I'd be lying if I said it didn't get me a little hype upon rewatching. The early CG buildings and cars look great. The way the angle starts off above them and then pans down to see the mice, then moves below them, right before he pulls up with no time to spare, causing an accident. And of course, John Candy crushing it with his long screams. There are a few things I remember in this movie more than anything else, and they're all sounds rather than lines of dialogue. Like this. And this. As McCleach is taking Cody back to his hideout, located somewhere in an abandoned opal mine, he tells the kid to be quiet or else the Rangers might hear. He's saying this over the PA system in his truck, which is much louder than Cody was being. McCleach would be one to talk. He has his face plastered on wanted posters out there. They know who he is. Yet we see him doing things that would draw so much unwanted attention. How is he getting away with this? Then he starts singing a morbid rendition of Home on the Range that talks about his taxidermy hustle, brutally offing and skinning animals that he keeps in chains, then getting up the next day to do it all over again. Horrific. Side note, apparently George C. Scott was dealing with an injury of some kind, so he wasn't feeling up to the singing. So Frank Welker, the guy making the sounds for Joanna, stepped in to do McCleach's singing parts. I don't know about you, but he sounds spot on to me. I would have never known if I wasn't researching stuff for this video. It's getting late in the day, about the time Cody's mom wanted him to be home by. We get an outside shot of their property with his mom calling for him. We go back to Bernard, Bianca, and Wilbur, resting after connecting with a bigger bird. They arrive in Sydney and make their way to the landing strip, where a kangaroo mouse named Jake helps them land. Their runway is too short for a bird his size, which is considered a jumbo jet to them. Wilbur doesn't give a fuck and says that he's landing whether he likes it or not. Jake and his fly friend, Sparky, bust ass trying to make the runway longer. It's not a smooth landing, which is typical for albatross air, but they land in one piece. The bug companion thing is not new. The first rescuers has a dragonfly named Evinrude that is essential to helping the mice, and he even follows them home at the end. What gets me is that the average life expectancy of a fly is a couple weeks to a month, depending on the conditions. A dragonfly typically only lasts a week or two, and if it's lucky it might reach a couple months. But since bugs in this world share anthro tendencies too, I wonder how it works with them having jobs or establishing meaningful relationships. That doesn't give you a lot of time to do things, so why would you commit your short life to a job? It is love at first sight when Jake sees Bianca, and it's obvious to everyone except her, who just sees him as being nice. Jake isn't wondering or caring if Bianca is single while seeing her there with another guy. Bernard gets stuck holding the bags yet again, and he knows what this bloke is doing. Wilbur tries to assist with the bags but ends up throwing his back out, requiring him to make a visit to the hospital, which happens to be an abandoned ambulance out in the middle of nowhere. The doctor and the staff are out of their minds. Wilbur is lowered down by ropes, and Bianca tells him that they will come back after they find Cody. Wilbur is scared as hell, and the doctor does nothing to reassure him, simply just telling him to relax, and that he won't feel a thing. He has terrible bedside manner, and doesn't bother explaining to Wilbur the procedures they are about to put him through. The mice shoot a cane between his back and the restraints, and he believes he's been skewered. The doctor missed his tea time, so he's gonna make that Wilbur's problem. He calls for 2 thick syringes, full of an unknown sedative, to be loaded into a shotgun. The nurses aim that thing directly at Wilbur's cheeks.
This is just all one big ass
It is
blast.
coast to
You're gonna
coast.
get your ass blasted.
After his ass gets blasted, we are back with the mice. Jake asks Bianca if her and her husband are on vacation, and his tone clearly changes when she says that they aren't married. He's already aware of the McCleach situation, and starts cock-blocking old Berno hard, flexing on him and making him feel stupid. Bianca doesn't really do much to stop his advances. She approaches it from more of a, "you're nice and capable and here to help" mindset, and doesn't think of it as him trying to tap that. This naivety leads to boundaries not being set. And now this dude is pushing Bernard out of the way, locking arms, and generally getting close whenever he can. That's even the case when they're riding on this flying squirrel. Jake and Bianca are in the front while Bernard is third wheeling it in the back. And he catches him doing his move.
What the hell?
Jake also later interrupts Bernard's proposal to save them from a snake. The Rangers diligently search for Cody, but they aren't going to find him, because he is being held captive in the belly of McCleach's hideout, his hands bound behind his back. He sits on a taxidermy turtle shell in front of a map of the region. The room is a horror show. Depictions of skins and furs are in the background, and weapons and traps in the foreground. McCleach is sharpening multiple knives and begins throwing them at Cody. With each throw, he shouts a potential location, an attempt to intimidate Cody into telling him where the eagle eggs are. He doesn't tell McCleach anything useful, even when he offers to split the profit 50-50. Percival is running out of options. He will have to take more drastic measures. Cody is locked up where multiple other animals are kept, in makeshift cages and chains, waiting to be sold or offed. Perhaps both, because McCleach enjoys expressing his artistic side with their corporeal forms. An incarcerated koala drops one of the most sobering lines when he says, "Looks like McCleach has begun trapping his own kind. There's no hope for any of us now," as it pans across the room and we see the bleak state of these poor creatures. He's right. McCleach has crossed an even greater threshold in his immorality. From poaching animals to human trafficking. This guy is as evil as it gets, simply because of how realistic this type of person actually is. Real life evil. Cody and the animals work together to try and escape. After a couple of attempts, Cody gets a hold of the keys, but McCleach stops him in his tracks. As he is pulling him out of the room, he tells him to say goodbye to the imprisoned animals, because it will be the last time he will ever see them. Wilbur is not doing well, as he wakes up with his head in a vice. Talk of operating is going around, and the doctor once again says nothing to help his patient relax. He just stares at an x-ray and starts calling for utensils. Wilbur has enough when the doctor calls for the epidermal tissue disruptor, and the nurses fire up a chainsaw. As he's attempting to flee, he falls backwards. The landing adjusts his back, and he feels 100%, at the expense of crushing the doctor. And now his back hurts. We are given a scene of a ranger giving Cody's mom his chewed up backpack, with the radio in the background talking about how the search has been called off. McCleach hatches a plan to get Cody to show him where the eggs are, and releases him out into the wilderness, following in his truck. The mice arrive just in time to hitch a ride. Cody predictably leads him to the eggs, and despite B&B's best attempts to warn him, everyone except Bernard is captured. This includes Marahute, because McCleach's badass truck has a crane with attachments that can fire rockets that turn into a weighted blanket that can then be reeled in. What's really crazy is McCleach actually attempting to kill Cody here. He sees him hanging from the trap, trying to cut Marahute free. He says, "Gonna get rid of him for good." Premeditated. He climbs to the controls and makes a sharp movement, causing him to drop to his death. If it weren't for his foot catching one of the ropes. The odds of that happening are extremely slim. That could very easily have been a wrap for Cody, and the mice would crawl back to New York with a stain on their record. I wonder if Bernard would still propose, amidst all of the anguish and character assassination. Adding to his evil, Percival asks Joanna if she would like to make sure that Marahute stays rare. Thankfully, Bernard replaced them with rocks to fool her. Wilbur shows up and Bernard instructs him to have a seat, and they remain safe for the rest of the film. Bianca has hope that Bernard will come to the rescue, and even defends him when Jake tries to douche on him. Bernard has a lot of ground to cover fast, and it seems hopeless, until he harnesses Jake's badassness to hijack a razorback to take him to the truck. Percival and Joanna have a loose end to tie up, and they take Cody to Croc Falls, where he is suspended above the water, which is full of, you guessed it, crocodiles. McCleach is really sadistic here, dangling him over these hangry crocs and dunking him in the water. The truck loses power and McCleach sees the Razorback. He threatens Joanna yet again and then notices that the keys are missing, thanks to Bernard. Joanna is on his trail, and a chase is soon underway. Bianca and Jake use the keys to unlock the cage and free Marahute. McCleach doesn't let the loss of power stop him. He grabs a rifle and puts the rope in his crosshairs. He frays it, and Berno has to act fast. He shows some balls by running up to Joanna and punts her face, and blows raspberries. She starts chasing him. He runs right up McCleach's leg, and Joanna follows, climbing up on his back, taking him by surprise and completely throwing him off balance. He stands on one foot, barely even on the cliff, and Bernard doesn't take any chances, and gives them a little push. The Croc's attention is directed to the screaming man flailing in the water. Joanna ends up swimming to the bank and getting out. But McCleach isn't as lucky. He is left to fend off a slew of crocodiles with his rifle, and he does so without taking a scratch. The Crocs retreat, and Percival C. McCleach takes it as him being too awesome. Joanna waves goodbye to her abusive master, as he looks behind him and notices the humongous waterfall. He swims for his life, but it is much too late. The current has him, and he is running out of steam. He is given no choice but to go over the waterfall and slam onto the rocks below. Not the best way to go, but he could have also had it a lot worse. This is definitely better than he deserves. He could only hope to die on impact, because you don't want to have your body crushed in the water and still be alive. Then the cause of death would be drowning, and that would be most unpleasant. Cody and Bernard go over the waterfall too, but thanks to Marahute, he doesn't meet the same fate. Cody thanks Bernard for saving him. Bernard rides on that momentum by finally proposing to Bianca, who says yes, and Jake can suck it. They fly off into the night, and the flick finishes up with Wilbur hatching the eggs, and one of them biting his feather, and most likely imprinting on him. And now he's stuck with these legendary birds following him everywhere. It looks like the Albatross Air Fleet has expanded. The end. Percival C. McCleach is a ghastly, devilish, and monstrous villain that can't help but spout evil from every fiber of his being. It doesn't matter if he's joking or partaking in a hobby. He can't do anything without having some morbid undertone. He enjoys killing animals, and it is not beneath him to also murder innocent children if it helps him achieve his goals. I feel really bad for Joanna, because she never knows whether he's going to genuinely be nice to her, or the complete opposite. He almost offs her or threatens to do so multiple times. And good on her for leaving an abusive relationship once and for all. One thing I wonder is if Cody went back and freed the animals that McCleach had in his hideout. How terrible to think that now that he's gone, nobody will be there at all, and they will just die due to thirst and starvation. Let's just assume that he did, okay? Believe it or not, there was a plan for a Rescuers 3, which would apparently tie the whole series together. Unfortunately, any future installments were stopped with the passing of Eva Gabor in 1996. John Candy passed away in 1994, but his character was already a replacement. Eva Gabor, on the other hand, is irreplaceable as Miss Bianca, thus ending the franchise for now. And I'm cool with that. We don't need another one. So what do you think about this movie, and the villain in particular? There is definitely stuff I missed, so let me know about it in the comments. If you enjoy my content, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, have a good one. Howdy everyone, this is Dave. And there's a Disney villain that I want to talk about. Goes by the name of William Bill Sykes. From Disney's 27th animated feature film, Oliver and Company, released on November 18th, 1988. The same day as the OG Land Before Time, and way less traumatic of a watch. That's not saying that this isn't sad at times, though. The movie is loosely based on the novel Oliver Twist, penned by Charles Dickens, and that is like the epitome of sadness and disparity. I didn't see this film when it first came out, because I was exactly 5 months old, but in March of 1996, Disney graciously opened the vault, and thus Oliver and Company was re-released onto VHS. And that's how it came to my attention. My general opinion of this movie is that it is perfectly fine. It may not be the best that Disney has ever made, but there are times where they put some effort into it. It's not the first animated Disney movie I think of when it comes to classics, but the source material is solid, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. The antagonist of this film is mainly referred to as Sykes, spelled with a Y.
Why?
Voiced by Robert Loggia. This man was perfect for the role because the character he portrays is unusual from your typical Disney rapscallion. He doesn't have any mystical powers or even an agenda for world domination. His special abilities are that he is straight up involved with the mafia. And even though he's resourceful, his tactics can be downright unpleasant. This fellow is a reimagining of the dastardly criminal of the same name, except spelled with an I, that was conjured up by Dickens and published back in 1838. Sykes is unquestionably in the top 2 characters that are total bastards that Dickens ever produced, the other being Ebenezer Scrooge. The main difference is that Ebenezer has a redemption arc by the end of his story, whereas Bill is a grimy, low-life, ferocious criminal that has severe mental illness and is violent. Criminy is he violent. And with the graphic detail that Dickens provides, you get to experience him wax worse and worse until he meets his end. The Disney version of Sykes is more of an intelligent businessman that always gets what he wants, even if he has to get his hands dirty. He's seen only wearing a suit and somehow comes across as mildly charming, even though he's psychotic. This adaptation's temperament aligns more with the character Monks in Oliver Twist, who is a lesser remembered character. Disney Sykes only appears on screen for about 3 minutes of the 74-minute runtime, so they had to make an impact with what little time they had. And I think they get the point across that you want to stay as far away from this beefcake as you can. The flick opens up immediately hitting you in the feels on 5th Avenue in New York City.
But that's simply not possible.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
A box of sweet kittens are on sale for $5 a pop, and a crowd has gathered to check them out. One by one, each sweet kitten is taken to its forever home, all except for an orange tabby cat that will be named Oliver, voiced by a young Joey Lawrence. It's so effing sad. You can tell how excited he is at the prospect of being picked. And by the end, he's completely alone and in the rain. The price has been marked down to free, indicating the seller has now abandoned this poor creature, and it must now fend for itself on the harsh city streets. I will never understand how people can do this to animals, under any circumstance. Piece of shit. I have a cat named Sam Max, but this reminds me more of when I got my dog Ruger. I wasn't planning on adopting, and when I approached, it was just him and one of his siblings left. They were 8 weeks old. They looked just alike, except his brother's tail looked like it was dipped halfway into white paint. It was really cool. That puppy already had dibs called on it, and was planning on going to its new home later that day. Ruger was just chilling in the back, gnawing on a bone or something, not a care in the world. I usually just interact with the dogs and then go on my way. But this last puppy called to me, and after taking him on a short walk, I knew I was not leaving without that dog.
You got till the end of the day.
That guy. Can you do it?
I have to.
He was the last of a litter of 7, and adoption day was about to end. The people were at least not going to forswear him to the streets or treat him poorly, but I couldn't handle the thought of my guy being kept alone in a cage somewhere until the next time they take him out. By then he would have doubled in size. Dude's as mud as a dog can get. Been DNA tested, and no joke, 16 breeds came back, ranging from small to massive dogs. It's insane. Even random stuff like 7% Dalmatian. In 3 weeks, he was not the same puppy I brought home. And at 9 years old at the making of this video, he's 110 pounds of pure splendor. And no joke, smells like those windmill cookies at your grandparents' house. Whenever I've told Rue about his adoption day, I'm sure to tell him that it was a line of considerable length. that vanished into the horizon. A prolonged procession of reputable doctors, lawyers, engineers, even a few celebrities, all anxiously waiting to see if they could snag such a beautiful pupperino. As a matter of fact, some of these professionals even resorted to fighting and causing a scene in the parking lot. It was very sad and just pathetic, really. And yet I, of all people, was lucky enough to snatch him up. He's so chill and just loves everyone. All I'm gonna say is he always has and always will be the best boy. What the hell? Feel free to talk about your own pet adoption story in the comments. That type of connection is missed out by everybody, as Oliver is left on his own. The cardboard box collapses, spilling him out into the gutter. He manages to pull himself up, but now he's playing Dark Souls, and everything is out to decease him. Even the place in which he finds shelter for the night redistributes a rude awakening. When someone fires up the engine and starts rolling, he spends some time on the streets trying to see if someone will notice him. Until a hot dog vendor walks by. He's obviously hungry, so he tries to get some, to no avail. Along comes a Jack Russell Terrier named Dodger, who observes Oliver's unfortunate attempts to secure the bag. He approaches Oliver and convinces him to go along with the heist to get some of them francs. Dodger's plan is to immediately switch to Old Yeller and chase Oliver toward the vendor, running him up his shirt. One of the last things you want to have touching your body is a cat that is losing its shit. And if you haven't experienced it, then I'll just say that things can and will go wrong immediately. Sam Axe is guilty of slicing my nipple in half through my shirt, for fuck's sake. One time I saw this lady whose middle finger had been bitten by one of her cats, and it got mad infected. Swelled up near triple the size. Hopefully she flipped someone off with it. Always clean feline scratches and cuts by default. But if you're bitten by a cat to where it punctures your skin, and you know it fucked you up, don't be a hotshot. Seek medical assistance ASAP, because the curve of a cat's fang harbors bacteria that is sure to infect the wound. It's biological warfare. Dodger uses the distraction to yoink some links, and leaves his accomplice high and dry. Oliver escapes and conveniently catches up. Dodge has no intention of sharing the loot, and Oliver valiantly tries to get his, while one of the most debonair Disney songs ever laid down plays before us. Billy Joel voices Dodger, and also performs the song Why Should I Worry for the soundtrack. It totally slaps. Got stuck in my head big time during the making of this video. Dodger thinks he's ditched the cat and makes off with the goods, heading home to a dilapidated boat moored in the Hudson River, where the rest of the crew resides. We are introduced to the rest of the gang. Rita, voiced by Cheryl Lee Ralph. Einstein, by Richard Mulligan. Francis, by Roscoe Lee Brown. Just saw him in an episode of The Shield, actually. And of course, Tito, voiced by the man himself, Cheech Marin. Dodger exaggerates the events of how he got the hot dogs, and once Oliver shows up, they figure out that Dodger is full of it, and they accept the terrified kitten into the family. Now, a good amount of you will recognize the voice of Dom DeLuise, especially if you're from my generation. That dude was in too many things to mention here, but most notably for me, he was Itchy in All Dogs Go to Heaven and Tiger in the American Tail movies. He's the voice of Fagin here. The pronunciation of the character's name varies because I've heard some people pronounce it in more of a bundle of sticks kind of way. And in the unabridged version of the book, a lot of the time they just refer to him as the Jew. So we're just gonna roll with Fagin here. By the way, I know the novel version of the character is an absolute scumbag and a paragon of evil, the secondary antagonist working hand in hand with Bill Sykes. Whereas Sykes is the brawn, Fagin is the brains. And he even meets his end at the gallows. But they do him dirty with the anti-Semitic caricatures that are even carried into film adaptations. Like, get a load of this shit from 1948. Oliver and Company's iteration is a petty criminal that isn't the brightest. He's kinda shitty actually, and never learns his lesson. He does have decent qualities sometimes, like he occasionally does the right thing, and he does love his dogs. But even though he lives in the equivalent of a mansion on the water compared to other domestically challenged individuals, the dogs deserve better living conditions than this. They will not receive the care they need once a genetic ailment afflicts them. Einstein is a Great Dane, and they have an average life expectancy of 7 or 8 years. He won't be able to get out of that boat and climb steps soon. That was sad, I apologize. He enters the room with anxiety for the upcoming meeting, a box of treats in hand, which is reason enough for the dogs to go ape. The fun is abruptly cut short when a dreaded horn blares from outside. Fagin feels apprehensive about going out there, because the person he is meeting is a loan shark named Mr. Bill Sykes. I'd say Sykes is somewhere in his late 50s, approaching the age of 60, may even be in his early 60s. His hairline isn't what it used to be, and he relies on spectacles to see. And he also mainly sticks to the shadows and operates in the background of society, keeping a calm and casual demeanor with a loosened tie. But don't let any of this fool you, he is still fierce. We are seeing him in the later stage of his career, where he found his niche and is flexing on that. If this man was born between the 1920s and 1930s, then he was there to see our modern world develop from practically nothing, and he could easily gravitate to opportunities provided by the mob early on. Judging by his size, strength, and ruthlessness, I'd say he was an enforcer and a hitman. Think of Goodfellas and the lifestyle portrayed in that movie from the 1950s onward. If you didn't pay what you owed, Bill Sykes would be the one knocking at your door. One defining characteristic of Bill Sykes is that he is consistently chiefing massive stogies. Not just occasionally smokes in some scenes like we see with other Disney villains, but all the time. Aside from the last few seconds we see him, he always has one roaring. Now I like cigars just as much as the next person, but it just hurts thinking about how many of these he is putting up in the air on a daily basis. My guess is 4 or 5, but maybe that's just me being naive, because to someone out there that may not be a lot. There are plenty of differences, but also similarities between the Disney adaptation and the novel. Bill Sykes in Oliver Twist is 35, but still works with Fagin and his criminal ring of young boys. He is described as a brute, whose despicable actions and antisocial behavior ostracize him from the rest. A proficient thug, thief, and burglar, he is also the pimp/lover to a woman named Nancy, and is the master to a dog named Bullseye that follows him around. Sykes has a very short fuse and abuses them often while in fits of rage, which are common for this character. In the 1830s, there was no such thing as mental health. People are becoming more aware of it now, but this story takes place in a time where a lot of immoral things were going on, and it was perfectly legal, or they got away with it due to corruption. Children didn't even have rights. They were put in workhouses and forced labor, which is where Scrooge refused to donate to promote better conditions in A Christmas Carol, and where Oliver Twist was sent because his mother died during childbirth, and nobody knew where else to send him, subjecting his first decade of life to cruel abuse and neglect that only got worse before it got better. In the scene where Oliver goes, "Please sir, I want some more," there's a boy who's described as tall for his age, being ravenously hungry. He thinks of resorting to cannibalism even. Life sucked for everyone. Bullseye is usually depicted as a bull terrier in film, but in the novel he is described as a white shaggy dog, with his face being scratched and torn in 20 places, which is awful. Sykes also massacres Nancy in one chapter near the end. He chokes, shoots, and beats her with a club. It is a very violent and bloody death, like hair stuck to the club bloody. Words like "so much flesh," "so much blood" are used. He regrets this almost immediately, and the horrific act ends up playing a role in his demise. But we'll pick up on that later. Fagin and Oliver and company just can't seem to get it together, which is why he's in the situation that he's in, dealing with a loan shark. Sykes advanced an undisclosed amount of money to him, and is now looking to collect. A scenario that nobody wishes to be in. And here's something I'm wondering. These animals flirt with the line between anthro and non-anthro a fair amount. Like they can communicate with each other, which is pretty standard. They don't wear clothing aside from occasionally wearing accessories like sunglasses and hats. Dodger sports a bandana, which can probably be put in the same category as a collar here. Cheeto also dons a bandana, but his is wrapped around his head like a human would wear. So that's one of those lines. I'll mention more as we go. They are aware enough to be assigned tasks that go well beyond any training the average person is willing to go through. Most people have zero control over their dogs, and yet this pack of strays have banded together with the unanimously understood assignment of finding valuables to pay back the loan. How do they know the concept of what debt is? Even though they have a grasp on what they need to do, they don't quite understand the logic behind it, because instead of money or something expensive they could hawk, they collect a bunch of trash, like a phone, hairdryer, clock, broken tennis racket, rolling pin, a chewed up wallet, a yo-yo, an empty bottle, most likely rodent's delight, a rubber duck, and other miscellaneous garbage. Fagin in the novel has a conniving mind and trains young orphan boys to be thieves and pickpockets, instructed to bring the stolen goods back to him, because that's his business model. The dogs that represent the equivalent in this movie steal to survive and to pay back the debt. Disney's Fagin has no business model, unless you can count for being an unsuccessful thief, and his networking sucks. He's probably seen as a joke and has burned bridges with everyone, leaving no one else to turn to. Which brings me to my next notion. This is 100% Fagin's problem. Like everyone else on the planet, he is responsible for what he makes out of his life, and he must deal with the consequences of living such a lifestyle. The fact that his expectations for survival are placed in a bunch of dogs to bail him out is absolutely absurd. Dogs could never understand stuff that only humans could come up with, like debt, cash flow, insurance, windfall, insurance rates, warranties, mortgages, Roth IRAs, and taxes. What does he do all day that contributes to hacking away at this debt? I wish I knew how much he was actually lent, because I'm sure back in 1988, it was hard for a guy like this to come across $20, let alone a few hundred, and a few thousand would be outside of his reality. Whatever the money was used for was simply a band-aid for future troubles he would have down the line. One decent change the movie made is at least Sykes actually takes care of his dogs. He even has a custom hood ornament of them. Sykes' dogs/goons are two Dobermans named Roscoe and DeSoto, who are also aware enough to understand tasks. They enter the barge and start throwing their weight around, while Fagin goes out to meet their boss with his puny chest of junk. Fagin knows he's in deep shit, and Sykes doesn't bring any sympathy, as he emits a constant stream of intimidation. Fagin tries to gas up the trash and flatters Sykes on his black Cadillac, but it doesn't work. Sykes is bamboozled by what the degenerate had brought. A real facepalm moment for him. Like, is this guy for real? He starts losing patience, shoving the chest in Fagin's face. Sykes opens his car door on Fagin, nearly sending him over the edge, and empties his ashtray on his shoes. Instant karma strikes as Fagin pulls off Sykes' mirror. He doesn't even acknowledge it, or use it to fuel any additional rage. He just goes back to threatening Fagin about the money, rolling his neck up in the window and blowing smoke in his face. Fagin starts crying and begging like a little bitch, and Sykes extends the deadline by 3 days, which is rather generous. These guys typically don't want to kill the people they loan money to, because then there's no chance of ever getting that money back. That doesn't mean they won't be the cause of something traumatic though. You can still figure out how to get the money on top of new medical bills or other ways they could disrupt the peace in your life. Although that does kind of happen here, because inside, Roscoe cancels their subscription to the only real entertainment in the place, rendering it unusable. Who knows how long it took for them to score that crappy CTV TV, and who knows the next time they'll find another one. Nobody reacts to that either. What is up with totally ignoring when someone breaks your stuff? Sykes ends the meeting by blasting his horn, startling Fagin and causing him to get wet. Roscoe hears the horn and tells DeSoto that it's time to dip. But DeSoto has other plans, because he just found a delicious cat and states that he likes to eat them. Being backed into a corner, Oliver uses his apex predator claws to slash the Doberman's snout, causing quite a stir. There's about to be a full-on battle when a second horn from their owner signals the dogs to leave with unfinished business. Oliver is accepted into the pack, and they hit the streets to teach him the ropes. He immediately benefits from being part of a gang, and within no time at all, they see a rich, fancy car owned by the Foxworths, with family butler Winston driving and daughter Jenny in the back seat. Jenny's parents are rich as hell and spend a lot of time away, leaving Jenny to basically be raised by Winston. These dogs decide to steal the car to help pay off Fagin's debt. Not quite sure how these dogs are planning on stealing a car and navigating it through the streets of New York, and if Fagin even knows a guy that can get rid of a hot car like this. Einstein rams his head into the side. Winston stops and gets out to see Francis laying in front of the car. As the butler is feeling the pressure from the judgmental onlookers, Tito and Oliver hop in the car to hotwire it. Things don't go well, as Tito is zapped and ejected from the vehicle, leaving Oliver caught in one of the wires until Jenny frees him. She decides to take him home, and aside from the pampered family poodle, Georgette, absolutely hating his guts, he adapts well to the luxurious lifestyle. Georgette is voiced by Bette Midler, so you know they gotta have her sing somewhere. We are given a taste of her manner of living, and she's as spoiled as it gets. Oh my god. Wait a second. Are the blue puffs a part of the fur, or are they separate articles of clothing? Why did they do this? Here's another example of them crossing that anthro line, because what the fuck? Stop sexualizing animals in kids' movies.
Your fantasies can't ever be quenched, can they?
Dodger and Tito followed the car to find out where they took Oliver, and returned to the gang to hatch a plan to extract him. There's a piano song that flashes a montage of Oliver and Jenny hanging out. They go on a boat, skip down the street, have ice cream, ride in a horse-drawn carriage, and she buys him an engraved silver bowl and an ornate custom collar with a spicy tag that doxes her wealthy family's address. The next day, the dogs set their plan in motion by ringing the doorbell. Winston opens the door to see yet another performance from Francis. As he is distracted, the rest of the dogs rush in and lock the confused butler out. Once inside, they search for Oliver, tracking mud all over. They enter Georgette's bedroom and begin prying into her love life, eating her snacks, and doing Oliver yayo. Winston climbs in through a window and is horrified by what they have done to his floors. He hears Georgette losing it upstairs and goes to investigate. Georgette immediately switches the station when Dodger says that they're looking for their cat. She is now very cooperative and wants to help them, because that means that Oliver will be gone, and she will be back to being the only pet in the house. She hides them from Winston and leads them to Jenny's room, where Oliver is sleeping. Rita is apprehensive about rescuing Oliver, because it looks like he's got a pretty sweet setup going on, but Georgette isn't down for that. And when they hear Winston approaching, she is the one to grab Oliver and toss him into a pillowcase. She even provides a swift exit via fire escape. They return him to the boat and gloat about how smooth the job went. Oliver is like, "What the f***, why you do that?" And Dodger's all like, "The gang means..." And he's upset that Oliver isn't appreciative of how much risk was involved in the retrieval mission. He starts giving him the, "What, we're not good enough for you?" and tells him to leave. As Oliver is heading out the door, a hopeless Fagin arrives and picks him up. He notices the collar around his neck and starts going off about how rich his new owners must be. This sparks an idea that only a desperate man would consider, and he decides to ransom Oliver for the money so he can meet his 3-day deadline. He doesn't even need to cut out letters of magazines because his handwriting looks deranged enough, especially including phraseology such as,
"And if you don't bring the money, you'll never see your cat again."
Jenny finds the letter, and Georgette thinks the whole thing is hilarious. Until her plan backfires, and she has to go with Jenny to the drop site. Fagin arrives at Sykes' warehouse by the docks, having banked his whole future on this one thing going right, not realizing that there are holes in his plan, and that he is nowhere near intelligent enough to pull something like this off. It doesn't even cross his mind. He thinks he's gonna roll into Sykes' office acting like a hotshot, and Sykes would accept his terms and respect him for it. But as soon as he rings the doorbell and Sykes answers in a threatening tone through the CCTV, Fagin retrogresses into a jellyfish. Sykes lets Fagin, Oliver, and Dodger in, and they take the elevator down to Sykes' office. He's really into building models apparently, and he's messing with the freighter while he's chatting on the phone. The conversation is incriminating, to say the least, as he is openly discussing torture and murder. He mentions starting with the knuckles, then suggests taking it slow as to not kill the victim too quickly. And of course, he makes a joke about cement shoes. While this is happening, Fagin walks up to a model replica of Sykes' caddy and breaks the mirror off of that thing too. It's like his calling card now. Sykes once again does not react to Fagin disrespecting his stuff, but he does have a thing or two to say about not having the money. Fagin begins fumbling over his words, trying to explain himself. But with the snap of sausage fingers, Roscoe and DeSoto lunge at Fagin, ready to rip him apart. Dodger backs his boy up, but he gets his ass handed to him. Fagin finally gets through to Sykes about the cat, rich family, and ransom, which makes him call off the attack. His gangster mind, thinking that this was a ruse to ransom the cat's owner, instead of the cat itself. He extends the cutoff by 12 hours, making sure to tell Fagin that this was his last chance, while giving a very creepy grin. Jenny does not inform Winston whatsoever about Oliver being kidnapped, or about the letter, and she decides to conduct this business on her own, finding herself down by the docks, where it's obvious no kid should be. She doesn't have access to her parents' assets, so she brings what money she can, which is her piggy bank. It's near impossible for them to find the drop-off point while trying to decipher Fagin's crude map. Georgette totally regrets her life decisions. They're not too far off because Fagin and the gang are nearby. When they start talking, Fagin realizes that he is completely screwed when it comes to getting the money, and just gives Oliver back by pretending he miraculously found him in some garbage.
His name is Garbage.
Jenny doesn't make the connection that Fagin is the catnapper, and it never gets addressed after this. But that doesn't even matter anymore, because Sykes has his own plan. After seeing Fagin cave, he appears from the night and swoops Jenny up in the caddy, straight up child abduction. He tells Fagin to keep his mouth shut and that their account has been closed before taking off. Oliver and the gang follow them to Sykes' warehouse and sneak in. Jenny is tied to a chair in Sykes' office, while he taunts her about his dogs only eating when he gives the order. Sykes calls Winston, no doubt making the butler shit his trousers, making remarks about the possibility of someone getting hurt, and that he should get his boss on the phone so they could talk figures. The gang fake a pizza delivery. Sykes finds this suspicious and straps up before investigating. The first depiction of a modern firearm in a Disney movie that wasn't a chunky revolver or a blunderbuss. Tito, Francis, and Georgette trick Roscoe and DeSoto into a tarp trap. Sykes frees them, and they head back to find a locked office. Sykes starts breaking the door down, so thinking quick, they hook Jenny's chair to a hoist and use it to get them out of there. Sykes grabs an emergency axe and chops the electronics, sending Tito spiraling while being simultaneously electrocuted. The rest just drop and conveniently land on a winding conveyor belt that slides them safely to the ground. But now, the fun is over. Sykes and his dogs are waiting for them. Just as the big fingers are about to snap, Fagin breaks through a window on his scooter, saving the day. He picks everyone up and they escape the warehouse, leaving Roscoe and DeSoto to eat their dust, despite the fact that Sykes is not far behind in his car. The Dobermans jump in, and he starts flooring it toward the drivable shopping cart, getting a little crazy as he careens down the stairs leading to the subway and does a burnout right on the platform. I am baffled at how they are going full GTA on the streets of New York City, and there are no cars out on the road or people walking on the sidewalks for them to plow through. Probably the most unrealistic thing in this movie. They are very fortunate that there weren't any people, because they would have racked up a serious body count by this point. It's also interesting that the NYPD wouldn't at some point be involved if something like this started popping off. The chase moves onto the tracks and Sykes follows. He throws his car into permagear as he snaps the handle off in second. He puts the pedal to the metal and the rubber on his tires shred off. This is convenient because the exposed wheel bearings can somehow allow the car to drive on the track now. I'm really wondering what the logic is behind all of this. Sykes is usually a calm and collected businessman that isn't trying to draw a lot of attention. And here he is, the Leonardo da Vinci of drawing attention, putting his face all over the crime and being hell-bent on committing multiple homicide. What good will any of this do? He went from wanting to collect money from a loser to ransoming a little girl after personally abducting her. Now, I have no doubt that Sykes could have handled this entire thing on his own. But maybe 25 years ago, with some planning, did he have enough time to think this through? What does he intend to do with her if Winston can't get a hold of her parents? Because most of the time they act like she doesn't exist. Is he really going to off her and dispose of the evidence? And now that there's a whole chase scene going on, what does he think will happen if he attracts attention from the authorities? Is he going to go quietly? Or is he going to take on 3 stars because he's in his angry era? Big feelings! Sykes slams into the scooter, and Jenny goes flying onto the hood. He breaks the window with his massive arm and tries to pull her in. Oliver's like, oh hell no, and leaps onto Sykes' hand and chomps on it. Sykes lets go of Jenny and pulls his hand in, shaking Oliver off, hurling him into the back seat with 2 snarling Dobermen. Dodger comes to the rescue, entering in through the sunroof and sparking a brawl. The tussle has them breaking out of the back window and duking it out on the back of the caddy. Roscoe is about to fall, and he grabs Dodger's bandana, but he slips it off, and shockwaves are sent through the Doberman's body as it skids down the tracks. DeSoto knocks Dodger over and is about to take a few inches off the top when Oliver jumps on his face and causes him to also meet his fate by falling onto the electrified tracks. They are definitely dead. How has Tito survived after being electrocuted so many times? He's got that anthro plot armor for sure. Jenny is hanging on for dear life and Fagin tries to help her out, leaving Tito to steer the scooter. Sykes seizes Jenny's foot and begins pulling her once again. But then Oliver and Dodger save the day by assailing Sykes. Like you'd expect, an oncoming train is heading right for them. Tito jumps the cart and they're able to avoid it. Sykes, however, does not become cognizant of the train until it's much too late. Chucking Dodger and Oliver off of him, he turns around to see the headlights of his demise, and he then experiences one of the more unique deaths that a Disney villain has ever endured. He loses a game of chicken with the train, and is promptly removed from the equation, as thousands upon thousands of tonnage sends him to the Shadow Realm. What remains of Sykes is engulfed in flames, a crumpled heap, crashing into the East River below. I just love the way they did this. The side angle where as soon as Sykes' car leaves the frame, the train comes plowing through, creating an explosion of fire, smoke, and car parts. His reaction to all of this is shown in a few quick frames. We see his pupils constrict in the lights right before the collision. In this situation, I wonder what is going through his mind. What were his last thoughts? Was he even thinking about anything at all? Or was he just like, oh shit? If we creep through frame by frame, we see the facial expression of a man that realized that he f***ed up, lost his cool, got in over his head, had a fit, went ballistic, flipped out, flew off the handle, had a flare-up. However you want to word it, he got caught slipping and was taken to the cleaners because of it. Sykes isn't wearing a wedding ring, but you know a dude like this was married at some point, with a family that he traumatized and is now estranged. But his adult kids get random envelopes of cash here and there. Watching that train smashing sequence, you see his face looking straight ahead. There was no time for him to do anything that would benefit him. He's definitely not thinking about his job, how much money he made, material possessions, debts he needs to collect, anything like that. He is completely at the mercy of meeting his end, and has to accept it. He just takes it, as he reenacts what happens when you got that story problem wrong in math class. When the train erases him, it doesn't even slow down or seem to receive any damage at all. Bill Sykes' death in Oliver Twist is way different. Let's talk about the novel for a second and add some context. Fagin and Bill are having a conversation about liabilities and leverage. to which Fagin says that if he is taken into custody, that he has dirt on certain people that he can use to bring them down with him. Sykes straight up threatens that if he or any of the boys in the company testifies against him on the stand, that he would leap over the railing and cave in their skulls, right in open court. He stresses that this will happen. Nobody would be able to stop him. He'd bash them so hard that he described it as leaving their head looking like a wagon had run over it. Bill then discovers that Nancy betrayed him, and he gets pissed. He storms home and awakens her, snuffing out the candle that lit the room, leaving only a little bit of light coming in from the drawn shades. She goes to open them, and he says something along the lines of, "There won't be any need for light for what I'm about to do." Then he starts choking her and pulls her to the middle of the room. She begs for her life hard and tells him that he's about to make the worst mistake of his life. He doesn't hear any of it though, and he produces a pistol and fires it at her. It only grazes her forehead, and she tries to stop the bleeding with a handkerchief. He doesn't stop there though. He grabs a club and begins beating her to death with it. The novel says that the room was an absolute horror show by the time he was finished. After the act is committed, he stays in the room until the sun rises, and he is forced to lay eyes on the aftermath of the measures he had taken in the full daylight. Even trying to cover up the body with a rug, her cold, dead eyes in particular, disturbed him the most. After trying to clean up as best he could, he left town to wander the countryside and backtrack along roads, finding shelter and sustenance when he could, being consistently haunted by visions of Nancy, especially at night. He hears the murder being talked about at a post office, and eventually there's a fire somewhere and he assists with putting it out. Afterwards, he also hears talk of the same murder that he had committed, and how it was only a matter of time before the killer was caught. Bill hears the direction that the search party is headed, and decides to make his way back to London, since they wouldn't expect him to still be in the area. Bullseye following him would narrow things down, as that dog was pretty easy to describe. If that description was out in public and they saw the dog with him, that would be a dead giveaway. He decides it's best to drown Bullseye along the way, looking for a decent pond, grabbing a heavy rock and tying it in his handkerchief in preparation. Once they reach a pool of water that Bill found suitable, he beckons his dog to come to him, but Bullseye gets a bad vibe and takes off. After a while of waiting and the dog does not come back, Sykes continues on his way. Bullseye escaping is actually a relief, even though it is fleeting, because the unabridged version of Oliver Twist can be straight up disparaging sometimes. That is, if you can actually follow what is going on. During the time that this was released, authors were basically paid by the word. So Charles Dickens would do what any high school or college kid would do, and he'd weave a tapestry of unnecessary details to up his word count. For example, the beginning depicts Oliver's birth, and that he has respiration issues. His mother passes away, and he ends up being sent to a workhouse because he has no family to take him. I described that loosely in one sentence. Dickens writes multiple paragraphs of that event, going into painstaking detail on everything, like 3 sentences just to say he wasn't breathing. The unabridged version of the book also has some stuff in there that you never see in film adaptations, like Oliver Twist being the apprentice of an undertaker, where he sleeps in an unfinished coffin. There's one part where he and the undertaker enter a poverty-stricken house to collect a body. They walk in, and it's a grim scene, with sickly children cowering in the corner. The unkept husband tells them that his wife starved to death, how he attempted to beg in the streets so he could care for her, but was thrown in prison. By the time he was released, his wife was dying. She ran a fever, and he recounts her emaciation as her bones rising up from beneath her skin. Her last night was spent gasping her children's names before she died alone in the dark. The deceased woman's mother was also present, expressing grief that only a parent that has lost a child can endure. It's gnarly as hell, bro. Anyways, Bullseye and Sykes show up in London separately, but around the same time. Bill ends up being found out and a mob forms. He attempts to flee by climbing over the rooftops using a rope, tying a loop around himself. However, as he is doing so, a flash of Nancy's lifeless eyes blinds him. He throws his hands up in response to the intrusive thoughts, loses his balance, and falls. The rope catches him by the neck, and he accidentally offs himself. Then Dickens gets way out of line by having Bullseye come from out of nowhere, pacing back and forth along the edge of the rooftop. Then he leaps off the roof towards Sykes' shoulders, but he obviously misses and falls into a ditch, rolls over, cracks his dome on a rock, and, I quote, dashed his brains. Damn. I told you the relief from the dog running away was fleeting. In movie adaptations, Sykes usually ends up hanging, but the reason he gets there can range from being shot to falling unceremoniously. I'm sure some of them out there get it right, because it's not like I've seen every Oliver Twist movie. Thankfully though, I have not found any that include Bullseye throwing himself from the roof. Very poor taste. And I feel bad for that dog more than I do the main character, to be honest. Let's get back to Oliver and Company. Tito's expert driving saves everybody from smooching the train. Dodger and Oliver survive the collision somehow. Then they make you sit through that typical bullshit where you think he's dead and it's all emotional. Well, guess what? He's fine. The next scene takes place at Jenny's house, with everybody singing her happy birthday. The guest list includes all of the dogs, Fagin and Winston, which I'm sure is interesting for Winston, having this shady guy and his dirty dogs having access to this multi-millionaire's house. Also, does this poor girl not have any friends? On top of having parents that treat her as anything but a priority, she also doesn't have anyone to celebrate her birthday with aside from this filthy criminal and his band of dogs that have never been to a groomer or the vet. I'll take a party with dogs any day, but don't be coming in all nasty and untrained. If this is the best party that can be thrown together for a wealthy family's only child, then it must have been absolutely traumatizing for her before Oliver came along. Not like this will be a permanent fix because of the awfully short life expectancy of our beloved pets. And within no time, she will be back to where she was, except she's 14 years older. Plus, she survived being kidnapped and almost died multiple times. And her parents still aren't there? I don't want to hear that you'll be back tomorrow. They should have dropped what they were doing and come home. Unless Winston's not telling them about this. If that's the case, he's sketchy too. Get this poor girl into therapy immediately. Fagin decides it's time to leave after he loses a $10 bet with Winston on a wrestling match and doesn't pay up, showing that he learned nothing and he will just get himself in trouble again by next Tuesday. After goodbyes are said, the movie ends with a reprisal of Why Should I Worry, with the dogs car surfing and riding with Fagin through traffic. The end. The Bill Sykes and Oliver and Company is a heavy-set mafioso that can be described as cruel, opportunistic, and sadistic. That says something for how little he appears in the film. Disney did not shy away from giving the impression that this character was a barbaric, violent murderer beneath his professional appearance. A man ready and capable to get things done. This Disney villain is one that didn't have a musical number associated with him. Could you imagine what a song about him would be like? Or if he actually sang it? The death of he and his dogs are noteworthy as being one of the more graphic and brutal deaths that Disney animation has ever produced. Sykes hasn't really made any other appearances in media, aside from the direct-to-DVD movie from 2005, called Once Upon a Halloween. Dang, it looks like this covers every villain from Snow White to Treasure Planet. I'm intrigued. Howdy everyone, this is Dave, and I wanted to point out an interesting Disney villain that gets practically no love. In this video, we will be discussing Merlock the Magician and the flick he's in, DuckTales the movie, Treasure of the Lost Lamp. This bad boy came out in 1990, and I had it on VHS growing up. Growing up in an era of no internet, you tended to watch what movies you owned over and over and over again. My sister and I watched this a lot. And as I watched it again, it was like I was remembering it in real time. The movie takes place between the 3rd and 4th season of DuckTales, but you don't have to be caught up on all that to watch it. All you have to know are the essential characters that you'd see in the show. The feature kicks off with Scrooge McDuck, Launchpad, Webby, and the nephews flying like lunatics to a dig site in the Middle East. Launchpad is a competent pilot, so I'm not sure what happened or why he's flying that massive plane like that. About to kill everyone. Either way, it makes for a good intro and it pulls you in. They find the location of the treasure of Kali Baba, a top-tier thief that hid his treasure in the desert centuries prior. They don't realize that they're being watched from a distance. They have to dig up an entire pyramid that serves as a resting place for the loot. There are booby traps and whatnot, but eventually they set eyes on the treasure.
Yeah, boy!
Upon finding it, Scrooge and the gang are stoked to begin loading it up to transport out. Webby finds an oil lamp amongst the gold and jewels, and asks Scrooge if she could keep it as a teapot for her tea set. Scrooge reluctantly allows for it. They are all betrayed by their guide, Dijon, who is in cahoots with Merlock the Magician, an ancient sorcerer voiced by Christopher Lloyd. Merlock steals the treasure and then promptly tries to kill everyone by having the entire party, which includes 4 children, be torn apart by massive scorpions. Like, what the hell, man?
Fuck the children!
They escape and the movie continues, but Webby still has the old lamp. And when it's rubbed, it produces a comical genie played by Rip Taylor. Hijinks ensue with the genie and the kids. Merlock stole the entire treasure in hopes of finding the lamp. So when he realizes it isn't in the mound of gold, he gets pissed, and then goes back out and searches for it, leaving the treasure to be lost in the desert sands. There were some of Merlock's abilities that stuck out to me after watching this again.
I got you, homie!
Not even counting magic. He's a formidable opponent physically, standing taller and being able to carry weight that supersedes any other character's strength. He's aggressive too. There are many instances where he resorts to physical violence and intimidation instead of using a spell or enchanted item to influence people. The movie doesn't go into too much detail about the extent of his powers. He doesn't really use magic except to shapeshift. He has a magic talisman that grants him the ability to transform into any animal he desires. So for all we know, he could have been an enforcer or some sort of barbarian brute before killing someone for the magic talisman, then afterwards fancied himself a mage without studying any further. So he's like a fighter with magical properties that are tied to a specific item and has no skills that he's earned by his own merit. With the actions we see him willing to take in this movie, it can be assumed that he acquired the talisman by ill-gotten means. Dude's got no problem leaving a mountain of corpses in his wake. It's important to point out that DuckTales takes place in a world of anthropomorphic animals, meaning that these ducks have human characteristics, such as wearing clothes and having jobs. This could be confusing to think about if you ponder on it too hard. It is plausible for these duck people to go to the park and feed bread to non-anthropomorphic ducks. Sometimes you see animals that are just animals. Would it be considered zoophilia if a duck person was attracted to the park duck?
Look at those tits!
Okay, anyways, the reason I'm bringing that up is because when Merlock shapeshifts into an animal, it's in the form of a non-anthropomorphic animal. This really helps him out, and it's interesting to see what he chooses to turn into to suit the situation. There are a couple parts where he turns into something small to infiltrate the area. Then there are some parts where he doesn't care about playing it quiet and turns into an apex predator and starts wrecking the joint. One scene in particular, he changes into a fucking bear and bursts into a room and annihilates it. The scary part is that even though he's a non-anthropomorphic animal, he still has his mind in there, and it really shows what the character could be capable of. Like, talk about overkill having a bear catch up with a duck. Imagine that bear attack scene in The Revenant except with Scrooge McDuck. Scrooge would be utterly wrecked. He's very sure of himself throughout the whole thing, but in actuality he's near defenseless. It would be a massacre, as he would be ripped apart and possibly consumed by a bear that had an unhinged person's mind inside. It's pretty dark when you think about it. The only duck that seems to know what's going on is the genie. There are numerous times where the genie is racked with anxiety because he knows what Merlock is capable of and how he plays a part in the sorcerer's evil plan. See, Merlock lost the lamp to Kali Baba centuries before the movie begins. But prior to that, Merlock was in total control. His talisman could be used in tandem with the lamp to grant Merlock unlimited wishes. His first wish was to become immortal. This came out before Aladdin, and you can see some similar vibes of a sorcerer wanting to control a more powerful being in order to control the world. Genie provides exposition on the atrocities that he had to commit under Merlock's influence, such as sinking Atlantis and causing an eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which consequently destroyed the city of Pompeii. And these were for apparently very minute reasons. Genie was a conduit for Merlock's evil and likely feels overwhelming guilt for killing thousands of people. The genie isn't trying to cause any problems, he just wants to live a normal life, but is constantly being sought out by greedy people, the desires to control him, and the selfish wishes that are made that he must grant, no matter how terrible. It's cool how they show consequences of not thinking wishes through, like when Webby wishes that all of her stuffed animals were alive. Like what? Living stuffed animals that act like the animals that they are? No thank you. There's evidence that they are carnivorous too. How do you stop them? If you cut off one of their appendages, does the amputated limb move independently? These are the questions I want answers to. At least if one swallows you whole, you won't suffocate if the fabric is breathable, and you may be able to cut or rip your way out of the stuffing. There's also a wish where the genie magically lobotomizes Scrooge to soften the blow of them getting in trouble for staying out too late. I can see where Merlock would find this beneficial to his world domination plot. It'd be more effective than Homelander from The Boys to just have a genie wave his fingers and people's brains explode in their skulls, or have their lungs expand too far and pop, or tricking your enemies to just fight each other. Scrooge eventually discovers the genie and the lamp and gets super excited about the unbelievable wealth he can amass. For his first wish, he wishes for the treasure of Kali Baba that was stolen by Merlock to appear in his living room. Soon after, Scrooge goes to a party with the genie, and Merlock and Dijon show up. At some point, Dijon gets a hold of the lamp, and instead of delivering it to Merlock, decides that he is now the master of the lamp, and he wants his wishes. Dijon fucks everything up for Scrooge by wishing for all of his money and assets, including his mansion. When Scrooge arrives home and sees what's going on, he finds himself trespassing and is arrested and thrown in jail. The Duck family bails Scrooge out, and then they plan a full-on assault on the money bin to try to get the lamp back and hopefully turn everything back to normal. I gotta take a moment to talk about Dijon. He's a total bitch. But you can't really blame a guy for being that nervous when he's under constant threat and assault from Merlock. I'm not sure why he got wrapped up working with this madman, but he is subject to non-stop abuse. His scrawny body is always being manhandled in some way or another. And Merlock tells Dijon every opportunity he can that if he fails, then it's coming out of his ass in the form of utter suffering or some sort of annihilation. Dijon is a live wire, to say the least. So the fucking balls on this guy to betray Merlock like that. Bravo, sir. You have my respect for that at least. But you shouldn't be sticking around in an abusive relationship with a maniacal magician. You're brainwashed, bro. Ultimately, Merlock gets a hold of the lamp first.
Surprise, motherfucker!
And places the talisman on it, granting him unlimited wishes. The money bin is then turned into a horrific lair. The ducks fight for control and Merlock turns into a griffin. Up until this point, we've seen Merlock as a cockroach, a rat, a massive bird of prey, not sure what kind, maybe a hawk, a vulture, a cougar, and a bear. While in each of these forms he did not have the ability to talk, now he's turned into a creature from mythology and is able to speak. Imagine you're one of these kids and this massive griffin is hovering over you and says,
I'll be back for you!
Before taking off. It's at this point in the movie where I thought to myself, Merlock has been alive for a long time. The word centuries is thrown around. He's not very pleasant, and many times is conspicuous and makes a scene. It's obvious that he's been that way for a minute. He likely has never had an issue with the authorities because he could just change into something and walk or fly away. The feuds and rivalries he's had over the years, where he's ultimately the victor because his enemies have all died from living a natural life, is an interesting thought as well. You're telling me that Scrooge McDuck is the #1 arch rival of all time, though? The one that finally got the better of him? Merlock has killed an unfathomable amount of people, and this old duck is the one that you have the most trouble with? That's very humbling. Scrooge and Merlock have a brief aerial battle. Scrooge beats the ever-loving shit out of Merlock with his cane, really letting him have it. It turns out it wasn't all talk. Scrooge cracks Merlock's hand that was holding the talisman.
Damn!
And it falls away. He changes back to his normal form and falls to his assumed demise. It is unclear if his immortality prevents death if an injury is sustained, but it makes the fact that he survived this long without being crushed or stabbed rather impressive. If that's the case, then he's almost died quite a few times when he's going around as a smaller creature. So you'd think he'd be more careful. Scrooge midair wishes that everything was back to normal and uses his final wish to grant the genie his freedom, which is honestly the way to go. I'm not sure if the genie sticks around in Duckburg for the rest of the series, or if this is just a one-time thing for the movie, but judging by how Aladdin did it, it seems like making the genie your legit friend grants you far more wishes than if you're a strict master a-hole. I mean, after he's free, how many times does the genie do stuff for Al without even thinking about it? You'd make out like a bandit. Always free your genies. In summary, I think that Merlock was a very interesting villain, and is extremely underrated. This guy is a psychopath and very brutal. He will sacrifice anything to meet his goals. Definitely a sick bastard.